All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all. We are back from lunch. I hope everybody had a good lunch and got a little chance to walk around for a little bit maybe. And I have had a number of requests, so I have turned the heat up just a little bit. But if I see anybody starting to fall asleep, I'm going back out there and I'm putting it on 32 degrees. I put it down because I saw her coming in with the fan earlier. So, all right. So we are going to continue now with irrigation and water. Who wants to know about irrigation? We all do. All right. So we have a overflow of information coming up right now. I'm gonna pull full hydrant coming at you, right? This is gonna be good, and we'll say this. I can't remember if I said this at the beginning, but what we want you to walk away with today is not a formula. I think I did say that earlier. Is that right? I'll repeat it now. It's not a formula for to go home, but more like you will have the right information to ask the right questions, right, going forward, including questions of us, of NRCS, and you'll be much better equipped to just think about your farm and all the different pieces that go into it. So we're very excited, but this is Dex's first actual presentation of this presentation, so no pressure. But we're really excited to hear this and see it. So everybody, this is Dex.
Well, he did hit the nail on the head. I could spend the time and actually teach you about irrigation, but we would be here for a few days. If I was to try and teach you everything so you could do it yourself, we would be here way too long. Because every one of your situations is different. So the irrigation required for it would be different, but as David said, what I'm here to do today is teach you enough information to where you know how to have the conversations and ask the questions so you make sure an irrigation system you have or you get works and is not a waste of money. So it's all about water management on the farm. If we jump into that, it is first question, what is irrigation? The simplest definition I was given that I love is irrigation is moving water from one end of your field to the other as fast as you can without causing erosion. You're going to ask, what's erosion? The way it was described to me is if the water at the end of your field, if the running water at the end of your field is cloudy, has any appearance that there's soil in it, that means there's erosion. So very simple definition for a visual check. But yeah, a whole point of irrigation is just getting water out there as quick as you can without eroding the soil. That's our biggest thing. So the first step in water management and irrigation is designing your irrigation system. So there are three families of irrigation that are generally regarded. There's surface irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, and micro-irrigation. Within surface, we have basin irrigation, we have border strip irrigation, and I'll go into some of these in a little more detail. But we also have, in sprinkler, we have the traveling gun and the center pivot systems. I'm sure if y'all are from around this area, if y'all are from Mississippi, y'all have seen center pivots. I guarantee it. Micro-irrigation is a very popular one these days. A lot of people, there's a very common misconception. A lot of people think that drip irrigation, they refer to that as the whole family of micro-irrigation. It's not. There's actually other families within it. Drip is just one of the more common ones we're familiar with. But yeah, so we have drip, micro spray, subsurface drip, which is a little more permanently buried. And we should be seeing, yep, there's the first example of surface irrigation, the basin. So another word for surface irrigation is very simply flood irrigation. That's all it is. And there's different ways to do it. Basin irrigation, this is basically just one level field. It's fully level. It does have, although a slight grade going down, but it's uniform. So there's a very slight slope, uniform across the entire field going down, so that when you turn water on at one end, it slowly flows down to the other end, and you wait till it's completely filled up or until the water reaches the other end, and then you turn the water off, trying to allow basically all the soil to have the same amount of time or access to the water. Obviously, larger operations requires much larger space to do that. This is a type of sprinkler called a wheel roll, and I haven't really seen any of these around here, but they're an interesting version. What you do with this is you move it into position, and it does not, you might think that rolls down the field while it's running. It doesn't. It actually can't do that. It'll break if it does that. So what you do is you turn it on, let it go for however long you're supposed to run it in that spot, and then you turn it off, drain the system, because if you don't, you'll break it. And then you roll it. You roll it one full rotation until those sprinkler heads are pointing back up, and then you refill it and turn it on again.
It's a lot of work.
It is. And sometimes these operations are, there are large farms like out in California. They can afford some immense practices with a lot of very large equipment and very complex equipment. Some things they do out there, not practical here. Just not. That's one of the reasons micro-irrigation is so popular, especially for smaller farmers. But that's one form of sprinkler. This next one is traveling gun. This one is one you see around here a little bit. James, who you just saw speaking on that recording a minute ago, he has expressed interest to me, and he's wanting to get a traveling gun to do corn out at Pineywood School. I think we have another grower who wants to do a traveling gun, but there's different versions of this that work in different ways. Some are automated, some can be programmed to kind of move on their own. This one looks like it is hand moved, so you have to move it yourself. But the idea is it's one sprinkler that moves throughout wherever you need it. And one important thing to know with sprinkler irrigation is it's not a uniform distribution of water. Larger water droplets will drop much faster than the smaller ones. So with sprinkler irrigation, you actually end up getting about a quarter of your area under irrigated. And there are ways to mitigate that, and that's part of designing your system, is to overlap the spray patterns in such a way that they're crossing each other and you're not losing that. But obviously, as we saw with surface irrigation, that was covering everything. Every single inch of available soil. It's a lot of water consumption. Actually, I think it was, there's one thing I actually wanted to tell you about. Can y'all guess, for water quantity, so you guys get a sense of how much water gets used, how many gallons of water do you think it takes to cover 1 acre of land with 1 inch of water? I want y'all to guess.
2,000.
2,000? What was that?
Several thousand.
Several thousand? So we have 2,000, we have several thousand. We have any other guests? All right, so to cover 1 acre of water of 1 acre of land with 1 inch of water, it is 27,154 gallons.
I know it's based on the sun, but roughly how long would it take to drain out of it?
That's dependent on the soil type and the sun and the slope. It's dependent on a few things. That's a very good question. But yeah, and as I was saying, out in California, they have operations that can do that. They can. It's not hard. It's dependent on the time of year, though, because as Delaney said, they have to ration water. So sometimes of the year, they cannot do that. But it is easier for them out there. So with sprinkler irrigation, you're not using nearly as much water. You can, you're not having to flood nearly as much, and the water is, more directed at that point. It's not just going to all the available soil.
But 25% of it isn't getting wet at all.
Yep, and it also has a problem. All sprinkler systems have a problem. It's called, and you can design against it, it's called edge effect, where because at the edge of your field, you can't have, you don't have sprinklers overlapping at the edge of your field. You have, a weaker crop growth and a more uneven or less dense crop growth at the edges. There are ways you can plan for that. It just requires a little more effort and a little more, installation. But this is the center pivot that we all see going through the Delta all the time. Very simple sprinkler system, and all it does, One end of it doesn't move, the other end is on, and then obviously all the other pieces are on wheels, and it's got on a motor, and it just rotates around on a schedule. You actually have a timer, you can set the speed. There's different ones that have different levels of controllability and programmability, but it just goes around in a big circle. Pretty equal distribution, pretty effective. Obviously requires a good bit of space though, and also very level, nice, even flat ground. You don't want a wheel getting stuck or flattened because you've got a big hole in the field. So infrastructure and things you have to think about when you're doing something like that.
Those are pretty expensive setups.
Very expensive.
Very.
Then this is
It's like generally like 150K, and not for some of the center pivots.
And how much land does that take? How many acres is that?
it depends on the system. You
Right,
can
so,
this
yeah.
depends on the size of the system.
Yeah, well, 150
Yeah,
just to
it's a big
start.
water.
What's that?
Have a well.
And have a well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good
yeah,
well.
that's right.
Yeah.
And you also have to plan for the fact a lot of the times you're growing a circle. You're not growing a square. So you actually have to factor in calculations. I'm not growing a full square of crops. I'm only growing a circle. So there's a lot of plant. That's hopefully we've taught you at this point. There's a lot of factors that go into this already. This is drip, one of our forms of micro-irrigation. That appears to be lay flat drip tape, which is very common. The nice things about drip tape are they're cheap and easy to replace. Drip systems are great for delivering really, really uniform water and just to the plant. So with surface irrigation, you're flooding all the soil. A lot of that soil doesn't necessarily actually need the water. It's just, it has to be there. In this case, you're only getting the plant wet, the crop rooting zone wet, and that's, potentially saving you a lot in water costs, utility costs, but also because it's so directed, with drip irrigation, you can have instances, if you do it right, where you have 40% more crop than you would just because you've managed the system well and you've operated it well. So you can actually make quite a good bit more money off drip if you do it right. But it is the most labor intensive to manage and stay on top of. It is the fastest type of irrigation system to degrade its quality just because it's so specific. You really have to stay on top of managing it. But there's ways to do that, and that's some of the things we're going to go into. So I'm going to teach you some of the ways you'd handle managing a drip system. So this is another type, micro sprayer of drip irrigation. As far as I've been told, I haven't seen any of these. I've been told it's a good idea not to do these in high tunnels. I believe it was David who told me that actually causes fungus to form inside high tunnels when you run micro sprayers inside the high tunnels because it's trapped inside that humid environment. I believe that is what he told me. I haven't seen too many micro sprayers, but go to the grocery store, the sprayers in the vegetable, that's what this is. And then this is buried subsurface irrigation. It's still drip irrigation in this instance, but it's not the same as the regular surface irrigation. Because it's buried, it has to be engineered in such a way that you can't get to it. So they have to plan for less problems to be able to happen to this, because you can't get to it easily to repair something like you could on the surface. But there's benefits to this. You're not going to run over a part of your irrigation system with your tractor and crush it and break it, aside from maybe that valve there. So there's benefits to having it buried down there for sure, and it's something that people do. This is a sort of tile system that I believe we're actually going to get into a little bit later. We do have, this is just a general chart. If y'all want to take a picture of it, it kind of sums up and as we said, we're going to get you the slides anyway, but it kind of sums up the different use case scenarios for the different types of irrigation. I don't think we need to, since we're going to give you the slides anyway, I don't think I need to go through in painstaking detail since we've got.
Did anybody have any questions about that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Questions. So next we get to talk about the materials, the system materials, what the different materials can be made out of. So some systems are steel. It's incredibly durable, but it does corrode, it's heavy, and it's expensive. This system is likely steel and that's something that is on a larger farm. That system probably gets moved. They probably come in with trucks on a, every other day, every day basis, maybe once a week. I mean, these are larger farms. They literally take that thing completely apart, move it somewhere else, set it back up and do it. But steel is a popular one because it's, very, very durable. Aluminum, durable but lighter weight. The piping used on wheel rolls is typically aluminum just because it's lighter weight. But the thing that happens, as I said, you have to drain that before you move it, because if you don't, the weight of the water when you try and roll it literally wrenches the pipe closed like a corkscrew, and you're not fixing that. So lightweight, a little less corrosive. It doesn't rust like steel does, but you still have to keep it clean. Copper. I love the way this was taught to me. You can absolutely get a full copper irrigation system for your place that'll last 100 years and basically have very little upkeep. It will cost you an arm and a leg, but you can do it. And that was one of the things they told us in our class was basically anything you can think of you can do. It's just, is it cost effective and practical is the real question. But you can more or less do whatever you want or figure out a way to do anything you want. But let's talk about practicality.
Copper a form of gardening? Like I know a lot of gardeners use copper wiring to put in their fields to help with the magnetic response or something like that.
It's an energy thing. Some people like you pull energy to help them grow. That's something.
I have not heard of that. I'm going to look that one up. Well, and one of the big bonuses that should be mentioned about copper is that it's the least corrosive to the water itself. It does not corrode internally in a way that can harm the water, and that's why the steel is a problem. Is if you don't keep it clean inside, then you're getting rust in your irrigation water, and that's food contamination. Not good. Poly pipe. That's what most drip systems are made of. The hose and the tape. It is obviously does not contaminate. It doesn't really degrade, but it does have a shorter lifespan. The great bonus of it, though, is there are many, many different variations from many different companies. It's lightweight and it's cheap. So it's the drip irrigation, or the micro-irrigation world has, which is supporting poly pipe, has expanded so much in the last few decades to where it's very easy and accessible for basically everyone. There's basically always an answer for what you want. HDPE. That's a more aggressive form of plastic. It's very, very durable. It's a very common plastic. I guarantee you guys have 20 items in your house that are made of HDPE at a minimum. It's very common, but it's incredibly durable. But it is harder to assemble. This is usually for much larger volumes of water because it's a bit more expensive and it's harder to assemble. They literally friction weld it together so that the pipe is one solid piece. Typically for larger industrial applications, but it moves a lot of water very fast. This is also a very popular one for small operations and farming. PVC. It's great because it is not corrosive to water at all. Nothing from the pipe internally will corrode and harm the water that's going to your plants. So it's fantastic for that purpose, and it's cheap, easy to assemble, lightweight, all that stuff. It does become brittle if left exposed to the sun, so I'm actually concerned about whoever did this setup. That system is going to become brittle rather quickly because it's exposed to direct sunlight. It's typically better to try and keep it covered or buried or even painting it, just trying to protect the actual surface itself from getting direct sunlight because it significantly weakens it.
How does water come through that? And then if you bury it.
So water is coming out through this hose line here into the T-joint and then out down the lines, and then those lines are probably perforated. There's probably little holes drilled into those lines going out into the field.
I think she was also asking if it's buried. So how is the water releasing and getting into the soil if it's buried?
If it's buried, then you would have to hook up some additional component to emit the water. You could just perforate it, but you would run the risk of it getting clogged from just being perforated. So you need to hook up some sort of emitter or something underground that would allow the water to, expel without getting clogged. And this might not be what you run as your lateral. You might, so for context, these are what I would call laterals. They're actually the lines going out in the field. Maybe if you're doing buried, maybe don't have PVC being the laterals. The PVC can be the main lines themselves running the water, and then the laterals can be like a drip tape or something like that. That might be a smarter way to do that. And so yeah, those numbers right there, that's really just to demonstrate PVC does shrink and expand with temperature. If you're laying 100 feet of pipe and your temperature changes by 70 degrees within one day, it's going to change by about 2.5 inches. Not much. If you're laying 1,000 feet of pipe, in that same situation, you've just lost 2 feet or grown 2 feet. And that is a problem for these joints that are solvent welded or glued to them. So typically the recommendation when you're assembling a PVC irrigation system is to do it during the coldest part of the day, the mornings and the evenings, before the temperature gets up.
What about flex pipe? Would they using in mobile homes, the blue and the red? Have you seen anybody use those? Yeah.
I don't remember any use case scenarios where PEX pipe was used or discussed. It might be something that's new in the industry and just hasn't reached the.
This cost per foot is a little bit more expensive, but it lasts a lot longer.
Yeah, I mean, it's way better using.
But I'll tell you one thing about it, rats like to chew on it. Yeah, so you gotta be careful about that.
We're building houses with it now instead of.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I would want to research about that would be PVC comes in a lot of different variations with different pressure ratings and things like that. I'd want to make sure that PEX pipe comes in those similar pressure ratings so that I can ensure that whatever system demands the water is pushing on it, it could actually handle before.
They're using it in new houses now for the plumbing.
That might be something that's about to hit the irrigation industry.
2 years ago, rats ate my plumbing system from under my house.
What?
Yes. They ate the plastic.
Pest control companies going to Congress now trying to get this kind of stuff to increase their business. Right.
Apparently, that's right.
One thing about this, when you find a solution to something, it's a problem for something else. Go back to that balance.
Yeah, the balance is very hard to strike. It's part of the scientists that's running your farm. So next is determining water requirements. So now we've talked about the different types of materials you can have and some of their pros and cons. Now we want to talk about how you determine water requirements. So I actually have an example, and this isn't something I want you guys to have to remember the math of. I don't expect you to do that, and no irrigation expert should. I just want you guys to see some of what goes into actually planning and designing an irrigation system. So we've got a situation here. We've already got some numbers. This person has picked out an irrigation system. So there's already some things that have been decided for. So this irrigation system, this person has an efficiency of 80%, meaning that's how efficient the system is at actually putting water out. It's never 100% ever. It's just not. So in this situation, the irrigation system has an efficiency of 80%, and it has a precipitation rate, meaning how much water it puts out over an hour, of 1/4 inch an hour, 0.25 inches an hour. The person is for some reason only allowed to water between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. That might be a local ordinance, which we are going to talk about later. There are rules and regulations depending on where you are. They are in sandy soil with the available water of 1 inch per foot. So 1 inch of the soil within a foot of it is where the available water for the plant is going to be contained. So we have a crop rooting zone where the roots are of 6 inches down, a MAD of 50%, and what the MAD is a crop each crop has a specific MAD, meaning if the crop has a MAD of 50%, it can only use 50% of the available water. So even though you think, oh, I have more water than that, no, you don't. that specific crop can only use 50% of what's down there. And then we have an ET. Delaney introduced y'all to this earlier when he was talking about evaporation and transpiration. We have an ET rate of 0.2 inches a day. That's how much water you lose just for various factors a day. And the ET rate varies throughout the country. So here it is, the same thing, crop specific. It's growth stage specific, varies where you are in the country, the time of year, and it's measured in inches. There's a lot of different factors that go into ET. There's whole big tables for ET rates. But this was something I took about April 2nd. I sampled some ET rates just to kind of show you the difference. Jackson on April 2nd had an ET rate of about 0.17. That's how much it's losing. Then you can see Chicago, Laredo, Texas, California, Boston. You'll notice the hotter areas versus the colder areas, you have much higher versus much lower ET rates. That's probably calculated using a reference ET rate, which uses alfalfa as its reference. So that's not in any way crop specific. That's using a type of grass just to show you about how much water you're losing out of the ground every day. But that just gives you a demonstration of some of the differences, how it varies. Now, if we're going to be doing this math, I want to introduce you to some terms. First term is plant available water. I think Delaney started to talk about this. It's the amount of water that's in the soil that the plant can use. It varies based on the soil type. As we said, different soil types have different intake rates and different holding capacities. So to determine plant available water, I would need to find the available water, which we were given, and the root zone, which we were also given. It was 1 inch times 0.5 feet, or 6 inches. So that means I have plant available water of 0.5 inches. That's how much water I have. I have ½ an inch of available water that the plant can use. Now, I talked about the MAD, so I actually don't really need to go into that anymore, unless anyone has questions.
Do you have questions about that last slide? Okay.
So here I was going to show you just some of the differences in MADs for crops that are relatively common in Mississippi. Different amounts. So sweet potato, great. It can use a lot of the water that's available. It can use a ton of it. Spinach, strawberries, not much. You have to irrigate a lot more frequently with those two. Sweet potatoes look like they can go for a minute and still be okay.
You would think watermelon would take a high concentration of water.
Right? Well, I mean, hey, there's a lot of water inside that thing. It's soaking up as much as it can. It wants to drink. But then so we have the allowable depletion, which is how much you're allowed to pull out of that plant available water. So we discovered we have 0.5 inches of plant available water. Now we need to figure out how much of that can we use. So we multiply it times our MAD, which we were told our MAD in this case was 50%, which is 0.5 when you express it in decimals, with a decimal. I did say that right. So we've discovered doing that the allowable depletion is 0.25 inches. So now out of a foot of soil, we have 1/4 inch of water that our plant is using. Not very much, very little. So now we need to determine the irrigation interval, the maximum amount of time you can go between irrigation cycles. So it is the allowable depletion, which we just determined, divided by the ET rate, which we were given. So when we do that, we see we have an irrigation interval in this situation of 1.23 days. And now I'm going to round that down to 1 day. Can anyone guess why I'm rounding down to 1 day?
Round it down.
Because of drought conditions, or?
Well, she started to say it the right way. Why am I rounding down and not up?
Because you're not gonna water while.
Oh, you're overwater if you go up, so you're underwater.
You're underwatering it if you round up. If you round up to 1.25 days, that would be underwatering because you've exceeded your maximum irrigation interval. But you can round down, and that's fine. You just have to adjust for the time that you've rounded down by. But that's fine. You can irrigate 10 times within that 1.23 days if you want, as long as you adjust the amount to be the right amount. You just can't go over that 1.23 days. Also, I don't want to calculate what 0.23 days is. I know what 0.25 days is. That's a quarter of a day. It's 6 hours. But I'm not going to figure out 0.23. 1 day. So we're just going to round down to 1 day. So now we need to just determine how much water we actually need to put out. So there's several factors for this one. We have our net irrigation amount, which is how much the system is, the amount of water you need to put out if your irrigation system was 100% efficient. If the system worked perfectly and everything got all the water it needed and was all delivered properly, all you need to determine is the net, but that's not how it works. We know there's inefficiencies. It's just how it happens. So the gross factors in the inefficiencies. So if we go down to the formula down there, we see it is the net is the two factors we've determined. It's the irrigation interval times the ET rate. So that's the net, which if we do that math, we figure out it is, looks like I lost a number there or something. But no, we divide it by the efficiency of the system. So now we have taken the net amount, which we needed to put out, and divided it by the efficiency of the system, which was 0.8%, which was 80% from the very first slide. The irrigation requirement, the amount we need to put out every day, the amount of water we need to put out is 0.25 inches for this crop. So once a day, you need to put out a quarter inch of water for the crop. And now the run time, simple enough. It's just 60 minutes an hour times the gross irrigation amount divided by the precipitation rate. We were told the precipitation rate for this system, it was 0.25 inches an hour. Hey, it just so happens that the amount of water we put out, matches the precipitation rate of the system. So that math is real simple. All you need to do is run your system for 1 hour every day to put out 0.25 inches of water, and you're fine. But that's the sort of math and planning and things that go on the irrigation specialist side to help you figure out, when you say, hey, I want to plant cabbages, hey, I want to plant watermelons, this, that. That's the stuff happening that they're probably not going to explain to you for your own sanity's sake. That's just helping. I mean, it's a lot. And that's just a little bit of it. But that just goes to illustrate some of the stuff that goes on the back end that factors into this, the science of it. Now, there was a point to make is if you wanted to double this amount, fine, just double the time. You could do that as many times as you want. But if, let's say you needed more water, you needed much more water, you needed 25 times the amount of water that the scenario is putting out for you. You can't do that because there's 24 hours in a day. And you're now trying to run your system for 25 hours. That literally can't work. So, okay, you can run it for 24 hours, but that means you're running your irrigation system nonstop all the time, and you're probably not leaving yourself any time to do anything else on the operation. So the solution to that, and this is why the irrigation experts are here to help, is you just don't get this system. If you need something that puts out 25 times the amount of water, you just need to get a bigger system. So that's part of the reason you have the planning and the front end. You don't just go out and buy your system. You research it, talk to the people who know what they're talking about, and plan it out so that you don't make a costly mistake.
So what I think I heard you say was your irrigation system is not an afterthought. Mm-mm. But your irrigation system should be part of your infrastructure that you're planning for the farm itself.
Yep. But most people don't realize how important or how much goes into this. They think it's just, I can turn on the hose or I can turn on this and that. You can if you're just like a little hobby farmer who's really not trying to do much, or you have a lot of time on your hands. Fine. But if you're pressed for time and you're really trying to produce a lot, you need to be more efficient with your time management. So, planning on the front end is important.
Yeah, so you really have to know how big of your area and what you're going to be planning to be able to calculate This right here.
Right, and if you're working with someone like, let's say you worked with NRCS to help get yourself a drip irrigation system, they could help you potentially write up a plan first, like, oh, this is the crops and these are what I want to plant. This is, they would potentially help with that on the front end and plan for that. I keep seeing Lee nodding along, and it makes me feel so good. I'm doing a good job. So yeah, this slide was just a wrap up. That was the information we had at the beginning, and from all that math, that's what we figured out. Run the system for 1 hour a day to get 0.25 inches of water. So that was just kind of a wrap up of that. And
Set it up and stuff.
but remember,
The hard part.
yeah, I don't expect you guys to remember that. Please save yourselves. But the next part is, so we've determined water requirements. We just have to remember it varies by crop, it varies by irrigation system. What's your water availability? What's your season location? And this is the general rule for all irrigation. When you're planning for water requirements in irrigation, always plan for the worst case scenario. The absolute heaviest, pushing it to its max, worst case scenario, and build it for that. Because that way you're unlikely to exceed what it can do, and you won't have to either break the system or have to go get a new system to do what you need it to do. But before you can determine your water requirement, you need to know what your access and your quality to water is. So I feel like we're going to talk about California here in a second. I love California, nothing against it. They just have a harder time getting water. It's not their fault. So here we go. We have quantity and quality. That's a pretty good quantity. That's a really bad quality. I don't think I'd want to grow anything out of that. And I really don't want to live over it. So water quantity, how much do we have? Are we in a water-rich environment? Yes, we're past the 98th latitude. Was that it? 98th latitude. The 98th latitude is actually a line in the country where anything east of that is typically very water-rich. And everything west of that is rather water poor. I can't actually remember though what part of the country it's in. It's like Oklahoma.
It was right around the Colorado area, and then it was kind of shifting.
Yeah, and he's right. It's actually moving. A few hundred years ago, it was actually the 100th parallel. So now it's moving more east. It's getting drier and drier out west. So how much you have is a big thing.
It's the desert. Everything out there is desert, so yeah.
Well, there was a part of this presentation I had to cut out, which actually showed how you can farm in the desert, which I wish I could have kept in for you, but there's limited time.
It's true. It's also a desert because of the rain systems. There's a spot in Hawaii that I remember going to when I was young, and it always stuck out to me is because it's like we took a helicopter little tour. It's like, yay, the most amazing thing ever. But it's like over here was like the wettest area on earth, like the most rainfall. And over here, it's the least rainfall. And like abutting each other. They're like right there. And it's just a weather pattern, right there. Yeah.
Mountains can do that. Mountains literally act as a shield in a lot of instances. Luckily, we don't have those around here, but I say luckily, I love mountains.
There are two waves of mountains there that the water is having to traverse when it comes from the Pacific.
Yep.
That's when that happens.
But if we're talking about water quality, I'm from Jackson. I'm used to having really bad water quality. I love my home, I really do, but it's just, yeah. I have to remind myself when I go to other places on vacation, things like, oh wait, it's okay to drink tap water. That's a thing. I have to remind myself. Yeah, so water quality. This water in the background here looks like it's got an algae bloom in it, which probably wouldn't want to use that for irrigation for several reasons. Probably it potentially contaminate it, potentially clog the system. You're gonna be cleaning those filters out a lot, but yeah. And we do have a filter to show you later, a small one. And there'll be a bigger one in here. So this is just important to remember. Those are the percentages for what water availability is. And of that fresh water, that's actually, most of it's frozen in ice and we can't get it. So only 0.25% of the fresh water on Earth is something we readily have access to. And that's spread out across the entire Earth. So it's important to remember that it's a scarce resource. Here it flows, like water, pun intended, but it is a scarce resource. None of the water coming out of your faucet is new. It's the same water. So remembering that and treating it that way is very important. So rainfall is a water source, very high quality, except if you're in areas where acid rain's a thing. We aren't. Usually acid rain is something that happens in a specific area repeatedly, usually from pollution sites. Quantity of rainfall varies, and unfortunately with climate change, it varies even more now and is changing a lot. You can use it as direct irrigation. You can use rain catchment and harvesting. If you've got a high tunnel, if you've got a 30 by 75 foot high tunnel, 1 inch of water hitting the surface of that tunnel equates to 1,200 gallons. And we have rain events here easily that are 3 to 5 inches in one night. So if you're catching that and then reusing it, that saves on your water bill.
And if you're not catching it,
yeah,
you think about the erosion that can occur from that.
If y'all hung around high tunnels, y'all probably seen they like to pond. They like to pond, and water likes to get in them from those events, from those rain events.
And that's why we were talking earlier when Delaney was talking about field borders and filter strips and critical area plantings. That's why when you have a high tunnel, you need other things like this in order to prevent erosion from happening.
Yep. Delaney and I have been on quite a bit of farm visits, and it's a relatively common complaint that, hey, my high tunnel has water flooding into it or coming into it from outside, and we need to figure out a way to stop it. It's a normal one. So groundwater quality, if it's stagnant, I wouldn't use it. We've had farmers who say, hey, I've got a stagnant spring that I won't let my cows drink from, so I have to get NRCS to come put a well out. We've encountered that. You have to consider the various pollution sources there can be. A cow field above a pond, if there's a cow field up in elevation above a pond and it rains, there's runoff, there's pollution coming from the cow field down into that pond, and if you're using that pond for irrigation, problems. But also things like old industrial pollution from was your site an industrial site previously, was your neighbor's site an industrial site previously, and maybe there's something on there that should have been disposed of that wasn't. Old utility pollutions, lead pipes in the ground, other fun things like that, living in Jackson, yay. Or is there active industrial pollution, which, acid rain could be caused by that. Quantity varies. It's regionally different. With the 98th parallel, it varies a lot. And also, the quantity is affected by the elevation and atmospheric pressure. It's harder to pump water at higher elevations because the atmospheric pressure is less. We don't have to deal with that typically, but it is something that other people in the country have to consider. Climate change obviously is affecting it too. We're now having horrible dry spells like last summer. Mississippi River is also flooding at other times of the year worse than it's ever done and causing all sorts of problems. So it's becoming less predictable. But we have a lot of different types: ponds, water table, streams, springs, lakes, settling basins. There's a good array of different groundwater sources. And then we have municipal water, typically high quality, not here. I don't care. I love my city. I really will say that. I love my city. I really do. There's a reason I'm still here. I don't have to be here. But no, municipal water, remember, it still comes from the ground. It's still the same water. It's just the city gets a hold of it first and treats it. But it still comes from the ground. Hopefully. But quantity, if you're in California, it is rationed because a lot of the municipal water is fed from the snow and ice melts that happen in the spring and summer, and it comes rushing down out of the mountains. So in the drier parts of the year, that's gone, and so they do have to restrict the water usage. So that is really just to remind y'all, again, same thing. No new water exists. It's all the same stuff. So don't try to remember that when you're turning your faucet on. I had this drilled into me when I was a kid, so. But yeah, that's just a wrap up, just another way to show you, just to remind you the percentage differences there. Now, if we're talking about designing your system, kit or custom, if we're talking about a kit, this is actually a kit we have here at this facility. We don't have it set up, but it's in the other room, and there's actually some parts to it back there on the table, which we're going to demonstrate here in a little bit. But this is a kit from Irrigation Mart. Their closest store is in Ruston, Louisiana. But this is their GK1000 drip micro-irrigation system. It has 1,000 feet of drip tape. And this is what a kit may look like. There's tons of different producers. You know, you don't have to use Irrigation Mart. There's plenty of different micro-irrigation producers. This is just one example. But that thing can supply 1,000 feet of drip tape. It's got some header hose here, which the drip hose, and that inside's the drip tape. It's got these are a type of emitter, it appears. And then the tape line itself has emitter. Those plug into the drip hose itself. The tape attaches to that, and then that plugs into the hose, and it lets you build laterals. But that's something that you can go online, order, have shipped to your house. It literally has instructions for everything you need to do. Still generally good to make sure you know that that will work for what you're, for your operation. Is the emitter spacing on the drip tape close enough? Is the precipitation rate, how much water is going to put out, enough for what you're trying to do? Because the emitter spacing does vary. And the tape thickness and type varies too. You can have thicker, more durable tape. You can have thinner, weaker tape. And unfortunately, we've heard a lot of stories about, or at least I have, about pests going after micro-irrigation systems. They like doing that quite a bit in various different ways. We'll have, coyotes go after it, crows will go after it, spiders will build nests inside the drip. But yeah, that's just one example of a kit, and that's something that, as I said, you can get through NRCS. They can help you with if you apply and get awarded that project.
Can you explain why there might be different spacings?
It's typically going to be, it could either be soil type dependent and or crop dependent. If you're using something like a sandier soil, you might want a closer emitter spacing because sandy soil has a really, really fast intake rate, meaning it also has a really fast drainage rate, so you have to, the water is going to go down faster than it goes out. So, but if you have a clay soil, a really thick clay soil, you can afford to have wider spacing because that water is going to hit the surface and it's going to spread out very, very far before it really percolates down. So. Yeah, very good question. Very good point.
In crops as well.
Yeah, and it's specific to the crop itself, how fast it grows and how much water it needs, and all that fun math we went to. But that was an excellent point. I'm glad he brought that up. I'm trying to give you all everything without overloading you. I got overloaded when I was taught this. But then a custom system, how to prepare for a custom system? Get your soil test done. Figure out your soil. What type is it? How much water can it retain? What is the size of the field, the topography? Do you need to do terracing? This is some very extreme terracing somewhere else in the world. I have seen a few farms in Mississippi that have light terracing. I think NRCS used to do it. I don't know if they still do. But in some cases you have to do it just to keep erosion in control. But I have seen a few farms with some older terracing in Mississippi.
Jeff, have you seen any terracing?
Yeah, there's terraces all over.
Okay, yeah.
Especially hill land. It's still farm.
Gotcha.
Around Bolton.
It looks neat.
Yeah,
How old did it work?
Well, it works. As long as you keep them clean, they work for years once you have them laid out. But you have to keep them cleaned off, and because you don't let them grow up and stuff like that, they have breaks start coming in them, and then the water gets concentrated, and then you have a blowout.
Is the terracing the same thing like the swales?
Yes, ma'am. It's more or less.
but luckily we don't have to do anything that extreme here. They're nowhere near that bad. But you do have to think about, you have to still have access to them with equipment. Like if you're planting in them, heavy equipment access is a real thing. It's like how big is the terrace? Can the tractor or whatever can it get in there without damaging things and still work the land? So just some of the factors you have to think about. And some of the stuff that would go into this, how to prepare it. Will the field be divided into different irrigation sections or blocks? I saw a blueberry operation not too long ago that it was probably about 4-acre field, I would think. Delaney, was that about right? 4-acre field? All blueberries with, I think, 4 different zones of buried subsurface. Well, the lines were all buried and then the drip were actually hanging along the lines. And it was not working anymore. It was an old system that had probably not been tamed like it needed to be, and it was having some severe problems running. But that's just,
So are you saying maintenance is an important part of your system?
just a little bit. And the surface irrigation for, comparison, that doesn't require much maintenance or upkeep. It requires a lot more water, but doesn't require much maintenance, not relatively. So it's, again, balancing.
Like the flood and dry?
Yeah, the flooding, that doesn't require much maintenance. It's just, can you do that? Do you have the water? Do you have the land? Is it ready? Is it level? Yeah. Yeah, so it's all a balance. That's all it is.
That water recycles back, right?
That's typically something you're encouraged to do. In some places it's required to do if you're doing surface irrigation so that you don't leach chemicals into the water table and the water supply. But yeah, settling basins are a very big thing and are very advisable if you're pumping out 50,000 gallons of water. You just put it at the base of your field, it collects it, and then you pump it back up. Yep, you got to clean it. You run it through a filter process though. Yep.
You're going to show the different filters, right?
I'm going to show you one of the smaller filters we have here, and then one of the types of more common large filters for a larger system.
Okay, you showed us a lot of commercial things, but for us with filters and everything, what about some things you can do naturally? If you allow your water to go through a system of rocks and gravel.
Charcoal and gravel, sand, works really good.
Yeah, I have seen those rain barrels. It's a really cool idea. It's obviously the natural way of doing it, where you layer rock, coal, and gravel, and sand, I believe, as well. Because sand is a very, very common filtering media, as we'll see in a little bit. So yeah, I have seen people take those big rain barrels, layer them like that, and then let those they make basically at-home filtering tanks, which that's basically all the commercial version is. It's a tank filled with sand. It's really all it is. It's just it's a big steel tank on steel supports that holds it up, but it's the same idea. It's completely natural. But that is a common way to do it on larger scale. But you can do it yourself.
Have you seen some other alternatives to that done naturally?
I've seen them in different shapes, but it's generally the same concept. Like say, just layer different filter materials and let them go through naturally.
Yeah, they have to go through several different things, lengthwise to get there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
You can definitely do it yourself if that cuts costs and that's more cost effective. Yeah, absolutely. Just make sure you do your research on the front end. They did not train me on that.
You won't need some materials for certain filtration. So it determines on how bad your soil and whatever else is going through there. You might just need sand. You might not need to do the layers.
But for Jackson water, what do you do?
Definitely use charcoal.
Double reverse osmosis system.
Can't be too safe though. I'm a Jackson native too, so I get it.
But some of the other things we have to consider when we're preparing for a custom system are the rooting depth of the crops we're picking, and this wonderful little graphic shows just kind of how different common plants have roots that reach to different depths. And what are their water requirements of the crop, and so that's really referencing the ET rate. It's how is the ET rate in your specific area affecting the water requirements? But there's just more, and I think this is the last one. Yes, this is how to prepare. What is the last for getting prepared? what is the source of the water, how much is there, what's the quality, and what are the costs and labor requirements of the system. Like she said, you can do it yourself. If that's more cost effective, go for it. As long as you've done the research and you've talked to the right people and it's being done the right way, then if it's cheaper, you can absolutely do it.
Have y'all seen anybody have the large tank that collecting 50, 60 gallons, 100,000 gallons? Have y'all seen any of that?
Mm-hmm.
Are they using plastic or metal?
They're using plastic.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they put a gutter system on their high tunnel, they collect and put it in there, and they run it straight back out to the drip irrigation system.
Yep.
And this is what, the second year? The first year that the NRCS reimburses for shutters?
I think it's the second year.
Second year?
I think second.
Yeah, okay.
And you generally, with a system like that, you generally want to put a pump between the tank and the drip system, because the drip
yeah.
system requires pressure to run.
You have to have pressure on.
And to get, like, let's say a drip system needs 10 PSI to run. If I did the math, that would mean the water would actually have to be 12 feet higher than the drip system for the elevation, for the drop in the elevation to provide enough pressure. So you need to usually put a little pump in line between the tank and the drip irrigation system so that it'll actually come out.
So then you want that electricity at your high tunnel.
Yep. Or you just build a water tower.
I have seen them two different ways, solar and the wind tunnels that collect the pump.
You can do solar, but you have to make sure you have a right size pump for your
Right.
system and enough electricity and storage system for your solar power going to it. Enough battery power, enough
Right.
batteries.
Well, I love that he brought that up, because we're going to circle back to that later. I love how this is a circular conversation. It's actually very helpful. A lot of these variables have to get introduced in a circular fashion for me to explain it. It's actually kind of challenging when it's explaining irrigation. I have to re-explain things several times. This was a demonstration that I was going to take you through. Do we have enough time to do this? Okay. Well, let me go get the, because I believe they're still in my office. Let me go get, no, I was smart. I actually brought them out. I thought ahead. So this is actually a demonstration that's going to show us how a system may get designed. And we're going to be using these handouts.
Leave another one over there for her.
Oh, okay. You have to play along with that. There you go.
Y'all need two.
I'll leave one there. I have more than enough. And here, if y'all want to hand them out, you can too. That's great. So this is a basic walkthrough setup for designing a sprinkler system. Now, well, and very specifically what we're talking about is we're going to be sizing the pipes that are needed for the irrigation system to run the water. So this is the system that they have engineered. It is a type of sprinkler system that we're looking at from an overhead view. And so it's a sprinkler system. Each one of these black dots represents a generic type of sprinkler that does a full circle, 360 degrees. The black lines are illustrative of the actual pipe itself. And then this little, divided circle up here is what they're calling an electric zone valve. It's a valve. It's more advanced than this, but this is just an example of a type of valve. It's where the water is turned off and on. Theirs, it sounds like, is electric, so they're actually able to turn it on with some sort of, electrical switch or something.
But just to reinforce one more time, this is a sprinkler system and not drip.
Yep, this is a sprinkler system. Each black dot.
First time we went through this, I kept thinking, oh, this is a drip layout.
No. Each black dot is one of those sprinkler heads, and it does a full circle. As it says, full circle heads, 6 GPM each. That's the flow rate. It puts out 6 gallons per minute. And then the black pipe, the black lines, which are the pipe, is class 200. That's what they've picked. They're going to use class 200 PVC STR21. So what that means, class 200 means it's got a operating pressure of 200 PSI. And SDR is standard dimensional ratio. It's a way to describe the wall thickness of the pipe. And then size pipe is not to exceed 5 feet per second. That's actually a rule for irrigation. In plastic irrigation, your water can't go faster than 5 feet a second. In metal, it's like 7 feet a second generally. But in plastic, if you exceed those velocities though, in whichever type of material you're using, you cause water hammering, where the water is basically, it can't move that fast, or it's having trouble moving that fast, and it violently shakes the system and causes severe damage to your irrigation system. And if you're using plastic, especially PVC, and especially the joints of the PVC, that can be really bad really fast. So you have to keep the water under 5 feet a second, and the way you do that is by sizing the pipe correctly. But let's see. So as I said at the beginning, a sprinkler head, they have unequal distribution. So as you can see, this sprinkler, that little blue area that's popped up, that faint blue area, it's going to cover between those those 3 dots basically. It's going to reach those other 2 sprinklers on both sides and below and above. So that's how much area one sprinkler is going to cover. So that's what the 3 internal ones are going to do, and then that's the area that the full system is going to do. And remember, as I said, edge effect is a thing. So the crops out in these edge zones around the border, they're probably not going to be as dense. There's a very good chance that they're going to be less dense, and you're not going to be getting as much. There are sprinkler heads, and there's adapters you can buy that actually turn these from full circles into angles. So you could buy an adapter that makes this a 90-degree head. So it's only spraying 90 degrees. You could make one, you could get one here that's for 180, so it's doing a half circle instead of a full circle. So if you design your sprinkler system to where those sprinklers are at the very edge of the field, you're actually mitigating edge effect there. But it's another thing that you have to factor into the planning and the cost. So now we know, kind of basically what we're dealing with, and we're going to start trying to figure out what the pipe size is. So now we're going to use the handout. So let's see, we need to figure out the water requirements first. That's right. So we need to figure out, we don't know how much water is flowing through here. What we do know is that each of these heads puts out 6 gallons a minute. So this first section of pipe, does anyone want to tell me how much water is flowing through this first section of pipe?
But all pipes are just one row of pipes?
Just the outermost sections, the furthest away. How much is, if those heads pump out 6 gallons per minute, how much water is flowing out? Well,
43 gallons?
cumulatively, it would be, what is that? 6, I guess it'd be cumulatively it'd be like 30, because it's 6 times 5. But in each one separately, there's going to be 6, because it's a 6 gallon per minute head. So 6, 6, 6, 6. So 6 times 5 is 30. So there's 30 overall there. So can anyone guess what it's going to be for these sections of pipe now?
Just a 2?
Well, just for that one, just for this one section of pipe, how much would it be?
2 squared, 2 dots would be 12, 3 squared would be
Yeah.
18.
Yeah, 12, yep, because it's supplying this pipe is supplying 1 sprinkler head. This pipe is supplying 2 sprinkler heads. So if we keep going up the chain, we have 18, but we're still not done, because there's this section, which has added all of these up. All of these are now added up into that one pipe section. And then now everything gets added up there. All the sprinkler heads added together. That's how many gallons of water are flowing through this this pipe. It's probably gonna, that's gonna be at that's gonna have to be the largest section of pipe we have, because it's got the most water coming through it. But now we've determined how much water is flowing through the system, we can start to determine what the pipe size needs to be. So if we look on the sheet, you'll see on the far left it says nominal size, but on the far left, that very far left column, you see the numbers going from 1 to 500. That's the flow. And we already know the flow. It says each head is 6 gallons a minute. So all we have to do is figure out from the flow what our pipe size needs to be for those sections. So if this pipe is flowing 6 gallons a minute and you look on the left at 6, you look to the right of that number 6. You see it says 5.05. Okay, but it's also in this weird kind of dark gray area. But you notice it's over 5. We've exceeded the velocity. We're not supposed to go over 5. So now you got to keep going to the right until you see a number, that 2.96. That's the velocity. If you look up above it, you'll see that says velocity. That 2.96. Now that's lower than 5. So since it's lower than 5, that's the size pipe we can use. So you go up to the top and you look. Can anyone tell me what that pipe size at the top of above 2.96 is? 3/4 of an inch. So that's our speed. That's our speed, 2.96. So all those sections of pipe are 3/4 inch pipe. Now the next one we have 12. So the flow is 12. So if we look to the right, we have a velocity of 3.58. And now that's 1 inch pipe. For 18, we have a velocity of 3.34. That's 1 1/4 inch pipe. For 48, okay, velocity is 4.32. We're getting close to 5, but we're still not there yet. We're fine. Okay, so its pipe size is 2 inches. For 78, velocity, still getting close to 5, but we're okay. I'd be a little cautious in this area, but we're still okay. All right, well for that amount of flow, for 78 gallons a minute, that's 2.5 inch pipe. Now why did I go to the trouble of showing you all that? It's to demonstrate the fact that, one, you do have to get a pipe that, if you got a pipe that was much smaller than that, if you just got all 3/4 inch pipe for the whole system, it wouldn't handle it. The system couldn't do it. It would not. It would break these sections probably pretty quickly. So you're saying, okay, well, I could all just get 2.5 inch pipe then. Yes, you could just get all 2.5 inch pipe for all of it, totally fine. It would meet the system requirements. You'd spend a bit more to do that because the 2.5 inch pipes can be bigger than 3/4 inches pipe. So that's the main reason I was showing you that, is to say that's why the planning is important, is that saves you money. That now that you've planned that out and you know what specific pipe sizes to get for the sections.
Math is money.
Yep. And one of the phrases that I like saying in my class was, if it's not measurable, it's not manageable. So and that's very much a thing with drip and micro irrigations, is being able to measure and calculate as much as you can. That's why it requires the most maintenance and upkeep.
This could be overwhelming. Before you put a seed in the ground, you got to
Yep.
get a PhD just about.
Well, remember, as James said in his video, the idea, the stereotype of a farmer is the old man with the piece of wheat in his teeth who's been on the farm his whole life. It's like, there's a lot more that goes into it than that. And if you're trying to farm in the modern era and produce on the modern scale, sell to grocery store, sell to Walmart, Kroger, there's a lot more that goes into it these days.
But you're right. You're right. The thing is, there's no one out there that really has all of that knowledge, because it's like you're going to surgery, and the anesthesiologist isn't going to do the work of the cardiologist or the brain surgeon, or there are lots of areas of specialty. So within this, there's we have soil scientists, and we have horticulturalists and entomologists. There are a lot of different, in biologists and chemists. We have lots of different areas of study because it's that complex. And then we have practical things, with the engineering and of it as well. So it really does mean that you can't just leave things to chance. But it also doesn't require that you have to be an expert in every single one of those things. There are people who help. There are people who do those things. So you need to ask the right questions. Even going into the NRCS office, if you know enough about your farm to say, this is kind of what's going on, I need you to help me solve this. Then they can help you solve that. That's what you really want to get to.
And to his point, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you something that is specifically designed to help you. It's something you can leave here with that lets you talk to people without having to know it. I was very purposeful. I want to give you something that lets you have this conversation without you having to be the expert.
Yeah, and then I understand that in the old times, old farms, they did a lot of things wrong, and that would cause the agency NRC to come about. I understand that. But also, our grandparents, great-grandparents did a lot of things right, but did not know they were doing things right. Like when he was talking about the temperature, and it goes back to what I said, my grandparents always say you had to wait till the ground get a certain temperature. They didn't know, I don't know if they did ever say 75, but they said after the Easter snap, when the frost is not in the ground. So I mean, but they didn't know the science and the temperature behind it. I just know that
It was generational knowledge. It was
I-
a mass amount of generational knowledge.
I can't remember, when did cultivated agriculture first begin?
About 10 to 15,000 years ago. I'm the anthropologist, so I'm trying to remember.
I think they were recent studies that they found areas that were longer ago than that.
It might be 25. It's hard for me to remember, but yeah. And so agriculture originally, we domesticate animals. That's how agriculture happened, was plant domestication. So we do have evidence. We have found old seeds of like original versions of corn that no longer really exist because they were selectively bred by humans, and that was how agriculture first came about. That's how humans first settled down and stopped being nomadic.
well,
I want some of that corn.
in Egypt, they got proof of, like the mice in here, they got proof how they did agriculture. They grew in a desert, how they irrigated water from miles away.
You should have seen the previous version of this presentation where I talked all about that.
Man, you should have.
He did. I asked it for time's sake.
Yeah.
I asked him to take the slides out, but briefly, Dex, why don't you explain that?
Okay, yeah, so, right, so, we had another question or something?
Yeah, I know I'm coming in late, but I want to go back to the water supply situation. We have a drip line such as this, we have a 1-inch pipe. What would be the ratios of water per minute?
I'd have to figure out what, you have a 1-inch pipe and you have, I'd have to figure out how much flow what the system requirements, the flow rate of the system is to figure that out. But we are going to go back there, once I'm done with my presentation, we're going to go back there and go through all that, hands-on and everything. So that might be a bit, so we can certainly circle back to that, and if we need to, we can see about even maybe setting up a farm visit where we come out and actually look at that.
We can come out and look at that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, did you have a follow-up? Okay.
I forgot.
It's a lot of information.
You had a follow off. Okay. Okay.
It fell on it.
But yes, the previous incarnation of this presentation had my actual degree is in anthropology, so I can speak to this with archaeology, is to the layman. So I can speak to this with some degree of authority. There are numerous instances of cultures within recent history that have basically dissolved or been dissolved because of their agricultural practices were not able to adapt to natural climate change. The Puebloan culture, which Americans are, the cliff dwelling old photos, the people who lived in the desert cliffs. Those people's basically direct ancestors, their grandparents, parents, lived in a much larger, very, very large structure in the Chaco Valley, where they farm the desert seasonally because there's not always rain in the desert. It comes with the rains and it floods the valley. It comes down through all the little streams and all the little cracks in the valleys until it reaches the main valley as one big river. They very successfully farmed this valley in mass and were able to support a large civilization that was trading as far down as modern day Mexico City, thousands of miles to the south. So the problem was when natural climate change started happening, the water started to become less and less and less. And this system in the desert, which had been very effective, could no longer support that large central population of people in one area. So all the people had to break into family groups and over a period of time abandon, and that's how they ended up in those cliff dwellings. Very similar thing happened to the Maya. I get the common question, why did the Maya disappear? It actually didn't. They're still there. I know some Maya. Their cities got abandoned because of the same thing, because of recurring droughts that overstressed their economic and agricultural system, that basically made their social hierarchy and their infrastructure collapse and forced them to go out and live in villages. So that's just an example of how natural climate change, and those are just two examples of how natural climate change has forced, civilizations to basically dissolve. And we're living in times where accelerated climate change due to human activities is very much a thing. So that's why I was harping on water management and treating water well and trying to treat your land, doing best farm practices, treating your land right. That's one of the reasons I like NRCS so much. They understand that.
I think part of the genesis of that conversation was also about the beginnings of agricultural times, and that came through observation. Mm-hmm. And so that's how you do this. I mean, people were foraging, and then through observation, they began to apply some artificial practices to it, which is like, how do we control this a little better? Yep. And then how do we control this a little better? And you see the development of technology and say, how do we use this to control this a little better? Yep. And at some point, we can get out of sync with that, and it's called the tyranny of unintended consequences. So that we think that we're doing one thing, because it's expedient to the moment, but what eventually happens is that we lose sight of all the observations that we made generationally to get there. And so when we talk about our grandparents, there were a lot of things that they did do well, and there were probably things that we could do better now too. We just have to remember the things that they observed, and apply the things that we can with technology in beneficial ways. Yeah. And hopefully we can have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, human history, the evolution of or the timeline of human history, this modern era where we've destroyed our land so quickly, is really short. Humans have successfully farmed the earth for thousands upon thousands of years in mass. So it's certainly doable, and that generational knowledge of our elders is very important, and unfortunately a lot of it has been lost. But it's certainly doable. It's been done long before this very short period we live in now. But to go back to the more mind-numbing stuff, sorry, I enjoy all this, but the archaeology stuff just gets me excited. But more things, if we're talking about determining water requirements, not all pumps are created equal. Actually, no two pumps are created equal. You need to know how much water you need before you pick a pump, because there are all these variables that you can see on the left there that go into a pump. And these are some of the variables, like the total dynamic head, which I won't go into it. I won't go into in detail. It's essentially calculating the amount of work in feet that the pump is having to move water from the water source to the point of highest elevation where the water can just flow down into the system on its own. This is a scenario where if you're at higher elevations, you may have trouble with a pump because the atmospheric pressure might not be enough on the water to force it into the pipe. Pumps don't work by sucking in water. Pumps work by creating a negative pressure. They remove pressure from one side of the water, and then the atmospheric pressure from outside forces the water in.
Like an airplane.
Yes, exactly, absolutely. I love it when people make that connection. So at higher elevations, if you have your pump too far away in elevation from your water source, you run into that problem. Here we don't have that issue, but it's still a general best practice to locate your pump as close to the same elevation as your water source as you can. Not to where it's going to flood the pump and if the water raises, but reasonably close. But that's the total dynamic head. It's one of the variables that gets factored into selecting your pump. And the next one shows all the variables. So this is a pump curve. This is why you need to know your water requirements first, because every single pump has a different pump curve. And there's a lot of different parts of this. There are what your flow rate is, how many gallons you're trying to push out, what your total dynamic head is over there on the left, how big is the impeller, which propeller, no, impeller, but same thing. They just call it a different name. But how big is your impeller diameter? That's this over here. How much horsepower is the pump providing? What's the efficiency? These numbers up here, that percentage, these are the efficiencies. So and I know this is hard to read. It's actually not as bad as it looks. Basically, if you're out here, outside in these outer areas, you're less efficient, and so you're not operating as well. But the closer you are to here, this is essentially the pump's optimum condition. Like the pump is doing its best possible work right here, where you're using about the 9.5 inch impeller. You're between 10 and 15 horsepower. You got about 85 feet of total dynamic head, and you're pumping 500 gallons a minute. That is kind of this pump's optimum, most efficient use. 500 gallons a minute, that's way more than I'm sure most of y'all are probably thinking of, so you wouldn't get that pump. That's why you need to know your water requirements first, is because that tells me I don't need to get a pump that big and expensive. I can get a much smaller pump than that, and that's exactly why you want to know your water requirements. And again, this is something that an irrigation specialist should help you with.
Yes, ma'am. You about to say something?
Worst case scenario, you probably want a bit bigger than what.
I mean, yeah, it's generally better to plan for that worst case scenario, build in some margins if you can.
5,000 gallons per minute. Yeah.
And see,
Worst case scenario.
You're gonna become the local fire department. They're gonna strap with your truck
and another thing too, you gotta know the pressure limitations of your irrigation system. That'll blow that thing apart.
Yep. Very fast. That'll be fun to watch and then a headache to pay for.
It's sitting up like a kite.
Wow. I have no neighbors too.
But let's see. So the next is understanding, managing, and testing your water source. So we have different contaminants in our water. Some different types of salts, oxidized iron, manganese, magnesium, borate, fluoride, which fluoride we all know is not very good. Delaney, would you be able to talk about soil salts in any depth? I think that was the original intention of this slide when we first had envisioned this.
Well, soil salts, we know salts can be toxic to your system, and salts are not conducive to plant growth and development in large quantities. Now you have some salts like magnesium sulfate, calcium sulfate, what else? Magnesium sulfate. Okay, all those are salts. And magnesium is good by itself. Calcium is good by itself is a nutrient. Okay, but when you add the sulfate to it, then that becomes a salt. Okay, so what we want to do is separate that salt from the nutrient, from the element. Okay, how do you do that? Okay, what you do is a precipitate. Once you see salts, then you see, once salts sell out, you got that precipitate or rim that forms. Okay, so what you want to do is be able to flood your system, and in order to do that, you saturate it so the salts can rise to the top, and then you let the salts remove itself by removal by water, by that inundation. Okay, that's the way you cleanse the salt out of your system. Now, salts in itself is not a bad thing, but it inhibits the roots from being able to absorb the nutrient that it needs, because roots, they tend to cringle up when it gets salt, because salt is a burning system. You know, just like you apply salt to a wound, it's going to burn you. So roots are the same way. So therefore you try to remove that salt component from that compound. And that's the way you do it. And because salts are toxic to root systems in and of itself.
So we talked about water being like the subway for the nutrients on the soil. Well, it carries salts in there too. You know, so that's just one of the things that we have to be wary of. And just, municipal water is going to carry a lot of salt.
And this is something we actually get a lot when I deal with high tunnels is drip irrigation does a really poor job of flushing salts. It just doesn't do a good job of it, period. So what I typically tell people, they ask me, why is my high tunnel not producing nearly as much as it used to be with my drip irrigation system? Well, have you flooded your high tunnel? Have you, between plantings or before you plant, you need to flood your high tunnel because that massive volume of water will pull the soil salts down. The drip irrigation system can't do that. So I get that question a good bit. We do have
Sir, this spoke. Are you talking about large size pumps or medium size? Because with our definition, we actually use our water drip from our main source of our house. And we have a connecting pump that measures the amount of water we use per day and whatnot.
Right.
So with the salt drain situation, would it be feasible to say that ours would not require?
Over time, we're not talking about just like one. Over time, salt builds up into your soils, and in order to try to prevent that from being a concern or a problem in your soil and your high tunnel, then you want to try to remove it out of your ground, out of your soil. In order to do that, you inundate the soil and then the salt precipitates to the top, and then it's removed that way. Because salt just separates from the actual nutrient, but at the same time it's left in the ground, it's left on the ground. So what you want to do is remove it out of the system because all salts fluorides. It becomes a salt, a compound, separates itself. And you're going to see that build up. But what you want to do is remove it so it don't become a problem. Now, if you're irrigating, you have water that over time, if it settles amount of inner time, then it's going to have a salt precipitate. And you want to try to remove that as fast as you can. You don't want that to build up in your ground.
Lee, Jeff, did you guys have any follow-up on that, on the general idea of salts?
Delaney touched on everything pretty much. Just I was going to touch, I think somebody talked about chicken litter earlier. The type of fertilizer you use, type of nutrients can contribute to that salt. When we were doing my research in grad school, we found that while chicken litter gave us the highest amount of just about every nutrient we needed, it also made those portions of our field very high in salt content. Because again, for our research, we're doing the same thing over and over, so we weren't flooding our fields. That particular plot had the highest salt content out of our whole 3-acre operation. So it is something to look out for, and another reason to do a routine soil test to see, all right, I know I'm getting my NPK, but what else am I putting into my soil when I introduce various fertilizers, nutrients, etc.
Please stop using initial NPK.
And what did you guys end up doing to mitigate the salt?
We changed that particular soil amendment because we had traditional cow manure, we had composting, we had chicken litter. For my research, we just concluded, because we were just trying to show the effects to our various
You're one and done. You're like, I'm out.
Oh yeah, no, we're done. After I graduated, I don't know what they did.
That's awfully salty of you.
Ow.
But we found out that a mix made it better. When we mixed the poultry litter with other things, it helped to dilute the content to a degree that it was feasible for more long-term use.
There's no plant that you put put in like a cover crop, there's nothing you could put in there with help pull salt out beyond
Because
flushing
it
it.
burns the
The
roots.
salt burns the
So
roots.
there's nothing.
It also inhibits their photosynthesis because it makes the leaves shrink, so they have a smaller leaf area to go by.
Yep.
So you see
We
that?
plants can pull a lot, but salt will about stop them before they can get mature enough to try and alleviate it.
Yeah, it'll burn the when the radical comes out. If it hits salt, it'll burn it. So your plant won't even grow if it touches salt as it comes out.
Is
And a lot of your
there any-
herbicides are salts too. You know, a lot of the herbicides have salt in them too. So that if you're in the old crop field, you have to look at your salt.
So this is one reason why with high tunnels it's really because when you're having high tunnels and you're irrigating within there, the water stays in there and you've got the tunnel. So there's nothing else coming in to kind of flush that out. So that's why it's important, at least for part of the year, to take that cover off and let the elements kind of hit it and remove the salt. In case we don't get into that today, we may have to do this for another time. But that is one of the things about high tunnels too. You see this in some other areas of the country. It hadn't really been adapted here yet, but we would love to see one. There are mobile high tunnels, and so they're basically on rollers, and you move them, and it's just like it's the same idea of rotating crops, but you're rotating your tunnel, and you're letting this area set. You can do that annually, or you can do that seasonally, but it's just another way of using that that technology and thinking about how do you best treat the land.
Do you guys use, or farmers you guys help out, do they use any other agents with their flushing, or are they just straight water flushing?
It just needs to be water.
So on average, for the high tunnel, how long you have to do that? I mean, is it after a season, after 3
I mean, if
years,
you're
5 years?
Because it depends on what you're putting into your soil. If you're putting in unnatural, if you're putting in chemical soil amendments and things like that, as I said, it's going to increase the percentage faster. I know what James did when right before they planted their most recent high tunnel full of tomatoes. He just, like a week or so before, he just flooded the tunnel and let the water, pool up and sit across the entire tunnel for just maybe like a day or two, and all that water, that mass volume of water, just pulled all the salt down as it drained through the soil.
Because, we said salt is a precipitate, and, it'll form a rim around whatever it's concentrated, whether it's some type of container, dish, and something, you see that rim around.
Yeah.
So once it flushes out, then it's on the surface. So it's not attached to anything, so you flood it and then let it wash out, flush out, then that's be one, I guess, a mechanical way of removing it from the system. But as far as a plant, some type of plant taking it up and being able to remove it, that's not an effective way.
A way you can do it, but does come at a cost, is you can have filters. That sit between your water system and the irrigation.
And
Water source and irrigation.
And you should, and that's one of the things where I think Dave was using that as a way to segue me into this. So exactly that, filtration size for drip emitters. When we look back there, you'll see drip emitters are tiny. That's the sizes they range from, 3 millimeters to 1.8 millimeters. The general rule for micro-irrigation is you have to filter out anything that's that's larger than 1/10 the diameter of the emission hole. So for something that's 3 millimeters, that means 0.03 millimeters. And I actually have a tool back there in the back, which when we go back there, I can demonstrate exactly how tiny that is. It's absolutely minuscule. It's almost microscopic. It's very close to it. But all these others are just showing what the different chemical percentage, I gotta stop saying I don't like that. The different chemical percentages and different chemical levels present in the water that need to be filtered out. ppm means parts per million. If you're not familiar with that term, it's just it's a way to count percentage or quantity within a sample. But those just show different numbers for that. And then we have our bacterial population that if it's over, 13,210, oddly specific number. If it's over that number, you're at a severe risk of clogging. If you're at 2,600, you're at a low risk of clogging. Not sure why those numbers are super specific, but hey, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is super specific, so they're trying to be as accurate as possible. So if you're trying to manage your water sources, what can you do? Water tests, filters, like David was saying, a flow meter. That is an easy one that you can hook in line. If it's just coming out of your tap from your house, you can just buy. And that's an example. Those are examples. Some of those are flow meters on the left there. I believe that one on the far left for sure is a flow meter, but they just hook in line to your tap. You hook your hose up to it. It just registers how much water is coming through it. It's a way to manage and monitor how much you're using. But then municipal water, we have local codes. We mentioned this earlier, alluded to it, that there are local codes, ordinances, or restrictions. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So that's the question. Are there local codes related to how I can use water? Maybe. It depends. That was the answer we got in my class basically every time anyone asked anything. It depends. It really depends on where you are. There's a general one that I believe most places follow, which is that one at the bottom, the backflow prevention requirements. That seems like that's relatively standard, just because it's the most likely to occur. But
What is backflow prevention?
I was gonna get there, but no. So backflow prevention, those are the next slides. It's events where basically the water stream is temporarily reversed, and you risk contaminating your municipal water. But we are going to get to that in a second. But the other things that may be local codes are rationing locations, like in California. It's just the easiest one to go to. That's why I keep saying it. And it's just the one that pops. There's nothing. I love California. It's beautiful. And actually one of my instructors from the course was from California, and had nothing but amazing things to say about it. And he used it in a lot of his examples too. That's why I'm saying it, actually. But no, peak pumping hours, that's something that some people may not be aware of. Utility companies may actually charge more depending on the time. It's like if everyone uses their microwave at 1 p.m. every Tuesday, well, the power company might actually start charging more for that very specific time window because they're noticing increase in demand. Same thing for anything on your farm. If it's using water or electricity, if peak pumping hours, those utility companies, if they're noticing a trend, they may charge more. So maybe you want to pump outside of those hours to save yourself some money. Startup amperage. The way basically every electronic works is when you turn it on, your car is the same way. When you turn it on, there's a very, very sharp high jump to the startup amperage, and then in a very instant drop. I mean, it's literally the snap of the fingers. It's less than the snap of the fingers. A very fast instant drop to its running amperage. The difference is monumental. Some utilities will charge you a rate based on your startup amperage of whatever machine you're using. So in that case, it's like, okay, maybe I should get, instead of one big machine, maybe I should get 3 small machines that basically equal the same amount, that can do the same amount of work as that one big machine, but they have lower startup amperages. Horsepower restrictions, or pumping time restrictions, that's that situation we dealt with earlier where we did the math. He had a restricted pumping window from 1 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's some places do that. Horsepower restrictions, some places do that because it's, if too many farms are operating machinery at once, it's putting too much load and stress on the utility company. They have to put in a horsepower restriction so that their system can, doesn't blow out, doesn't give out under the strain. Pressure and flow restrictions, same thing. It's just instead of the power utility, it's the water utility that's measuring that. They're not wanting you to use more than they can provide. Then the backflow prevention requirements. There's a backflow situation. That is a water main busting, and somewhere in Australia, I believe. So that is an example of a backflow or back pressure event. And what that means is when that pipe burst, any water downstream of it would have flowed in reverse for a given amount of time. Maybe not too long, maybe a second. But as it happened, it would have flowed in reverse. So let's say you have an irrigation system that is running fertilizer. You have fertilizer hooked up to your irrigation system. It's injecting it into the water. You have a backflow event. Your irrigation, your contaminated water has just now re-entered the municipal water supply, and now some part of it is going downstream to your neighbors, and they're drinking water. The city can come after you for that. If you weren't putting something in place to prevent it, which is not like it's expensive or hard to do, if you weren't managing that, and the city finds out you contaminated the water supply during a back pressure event or a backflow event, you can get in trouble.
And this is part of your, for those of you who may pursue some kind of food safety certification, this is part, irrigation is part of your food safety requirements. Backflow prevention is one of the things that it is an actual requirement that gets checked. But actually being able to identify your water source, that it's been tested, and to have the parts of your system be identifiable within that and have maintenance records for them, those are parts of your food safety requirements too. So you need to keep that in mind. If you're thinking about really doing something like this, you gotta go all in on these things, and you gotta keep your records, and you gotta keep your inventory, and you gotta do your maintenance.
Yep. And this next slide is I'm not going to go into every single type of backflow prevention device because it is honestly confusing. There's a lot of different variations of it. I wanted to show you just this one because this is just a generic form of one. I wanted you to notice that because if you remember that that's in general what a type of backflow prevention system looks like, look around town.
Yeah, I seen those before, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
What it is.
If you look at behind most, commercial buildings, gas stations, if you pay attention while driving, you'll see these. They're everywhere. And all it is when water decides to go the opposite direction, the valves shut immediately and don't allow it to pass. But they're absolutely everywhere. So I just wanted to let you see that because now you're going to be driving around and say, oh, there's one. Look at that.
So a big farm had to put one of those on their property?
A big farm may have to put in a set of these, a series of these. Yep, it depends on exactly how large the operation is. For your purposes, for small scale purposes, it's literally a tiny little, sometimes even plastic. Like it's not very much. It's very small little components.
All farmers have to.
No, all farmers don't have to have
I know not
this.
that one, but all farmers have to have a backflow provision.
You should. It's a covering yourself from liability.
Insurance.
Yeah.
If you're using municipal water,
Yeah.
then that is going to be the thing. You have to have a backflow prevention,
Yeah.
so that you don't end up sending fertilizer, pesticide, or anything else back into the water supply.
And now, if you're pumping from a pond, you may also want it in case there's like wildlife, like fish and things that live in the pond, because you could potentially destroy the pond's ecosystem. So maybe for that situation too. But yeah, really, it's mainly for municipal water.
I'll tell you another example, pretty much the same concept. Your J trap under your sink, under your drain.
Yeah.
When you're going out your sink, what's that J trap for?
It's you have to go back here.
Prevent that odor from coming back into your house, that sulfur gas odor from coming back into your sink, into your house. So you put that little J where the water is a water content that stays in that little J loop in order for that backflow to prevent gases from coming back into your house. So.
And keep your wires, earrings from going down the sewer.
Yeah, sure do that. Sure do that. Yeah, sure will.
There may be a story there.
Well, this next slide is just it's an example of some piece of hardware that different farms may have to install. If you're using something like solid, metal piping, this might be something you need. It's called a vacuum release valve. This one I believe is a form of a combination valve. So this both releases air and lets air in to the irrigation system. Now you ask, with a solid steel pipe system, why might you want to do that? Well, it's because if you're turning on your irrigation system, charging it and filling the line with water, that's what charging means, is to fill the system. If you charge it too quickly, the air that's trapped in the system doesn't have enough time to get out. So this lets it out so that you don't end up damaging your system by causing too much pressure inside. The reverse of that though, why would it let air in, is because if you turn your system off, now there's no more water flowing and the water's exiting very fast. What's happening behind that water?
Sucking.
Yeah, is a vacuum. There's a void where, and you know, as we know, high pressure likes to move into low pressure. And so your steel pipe that was this all of a sudden does that. And you're not fixing that, you're replacing it. So for y'all's operations, probably don't need something like that, but it is an example of a piece of hardware that larger farms with more aggressive irrigation system need. This is just a chart to show you what I meant by the startup amperage. So these flat lines here are the running amperage. Whatever it is has now been turned on. It's just running, so it's going to maintain that. That was the amperage right when it started up. For a split second, a blink of an eye, that was the startup amperage. So some utility companies will charge you for that and not that, even though that only lasts, you know, that long. You can't snap with that hand. But yeah, so that's just an illustration, a good illustration. So what you do about local regulations, if you don't know, call NRCS, because they would be able to help with that. Call an irrigation specialist, call your local water or power authority, and those are different questions you can ask them. I would say generally it's probably best to call NRCS, because you may, even though you may have some specific questions, you may call the water or the power company and be asking these questions, and they're like, what are you talking about? I don't know. Working with NRCS may be a little more beneficial, because they're like, I know how to ask this question so that they actually understand what you're talking about. Because you know, they're the water and power company. They don't just deal with farmers, they deal with everyone. You don't know for sure that the person you're going to get on the other end of the line is going to know what you're talking about. So just a plug for NRCS. But why you want to work with an irrigation specialist? Because of everything I've told you. All this stuff I've told you is stuff that I was trained and taught how to, you know, how to know about it, what to know about it, how to plan it, design it, factor it in. And I'm not certified yet. We're working on that, but that's the entire point of working with an irrigation specialist. And NRCS can help connect you with people like that, connect you with people like us. But it's to take the load off you, so you don't have to know all that horrible math and stuff that I have to know.
So I'm going to interject here for 1 second and just say something. This is, you know, we were talking before about, we have contracts, we have agreements with NRCS where we help provide technical services and support. And we were trying to put on a big conference specifically on water management. And we reached out, and NRCS told us who to contact. You know, basically contacting Extension, because they have a whole bunch of engineers on staff, and that's what they do. They have irrigation specialists, they're engineers, they develop these systems. We reached out to them and said, hey, we want to do a conference, and we want to support small farmers in this, and that's really what we're geared toward. And they said, look, we love what you're doing, and we want to help you. But none of our engineers work on small systems, so they don't have any experience in that. They do big systems and mainly supporting lake farms in the Delta and those kinds of systems out there. So when they're coming in, and these are projects what NRCS is looking at, like when we were talking about a pivot earlier. You know, when you might have a minimum acreage requirement of 50 acres, you know, or 100 acres. Those are the units that they measure in. So how many units? Oh, we've got 6 units of 100 acres. Yeah. So that's a different scale from 1 acre. You know, look at that. We're looking at acres that are like a unit. But right now, because of what has been the demand for a long time, this specialty doesn't really exist here, does not exist in this state. So we made a concerted effort to invest in this and develop this so that we could have this technical support here, because we believe that there are a lot of practices that NRCS has that are really, really good. But when it comes to some support for, and it's not just irrigation, but it is drainage, you know, and in some land shaping and land forming around that might be required. It's really hard to scale that down when the initial engineering on it hasn't been done. So this is where we're trying to help fill in that gap right now and make sure that you can get this kind of assistance.
I want to say I called and Mr. Johnson came out, and I was so pleased with the technical assistance that they gave us, and we're trying to pursue it, the information that he gave us. So, and you're absolutely correct. We went the other route and just didn't get, you know, the information we needed because of the size. But it did come out.
That's good to hear. Well, it's bad to hear, but I'm glad we could help.
I was
with
glad
it.
there was someone hands-on because, you know, we were guessing.
Right.
And we did make a lot of mistakes because we were following them, and they just didn't allow the small questions like we have now just couldn't be answered, you know, about the irrigation system. How do we put this thing in? We got it, we ordered it, because that's what the grant said, and now here it is. We had no one to say how to put it in. Something like, how do you punch a hole in the pipes when the little thing won't go inside to make it come to the water?
Right.
So those are the
Right.
small things that we
Right.
needed.
Right.
But critical.
You know, I saw on PBS, Hitler almost won the war, almost took Great Britain down because Great Britain had all this stuff shipped in on ships, and Hitler cut off their shipping supply. And people had got away from farming. So they were starving. The males, the young people, the males was out fighting, the women was in the factories, and they were starving because they couldn't get product in. So they had to go back. The older people, the young kids that was in school, was so like that in school full time, they had to go back to farming in order to survive, to eat. And that, now, I remember looking at that and I'm going like, I hope the United States, anybody should learn from this, how important it is to have farmers, how small farmers became big farmers at one time, but how small farmers could feed a large scale of people. Just think, they almost won the war because of that one little thing. Just think.
This is a remarkable observation and comment, but it is, it's very true. I think that perhaps the pandemic also exposed the weakness of our supply chain overall, what kind of gaps exist within that, and how susceptible we are to problems where we might not have food. The things that we're used to having, a lot of the things that we take for granted, they may not be there. You know, so we really do have to rethink our food system from the ground up.
Yeah.
And we're doing it. And you guys are actually the ones who are going to be bringing that in. Yes.
I commend all of them for being here and wanting to do this. This is a big step.
It is.
We're
Yeah.
I'll see what else I can teach you in the time, and we're actually getting close to the end here, but I'll see what else I can give y'all information on so that y'all can take it back and use it.
Can you try 5 minutes and we can move over to the...
We got 25 slides left.
Why don't we do this first? Because Alea needs to operate the camera and she's got to leave at 3:30. So if we can, would this be a good time to pivot for you?
I mean, yeah, we kind of just started a new section, so.
Okay, let's pivot, and we are going to move to the back, and I'm gonna stand up here and kill some time for a second while everybody is gathering around there to do some demonstrations. Next, going back.
And there's one thing I'd like to say about irrigation tape, subsurface irrigation tape. Make sure you use the kind that has copper on the emitters, because if you don't, roots will grow into those emitters and stop it up.
Intrusion is a thing.
Yeah, right.
That's a really good point. Okay, so good.
Where's Delaney?
So while we are transitioning back here, does anybody have any other questions that haven't been answered for a moment? I don't see any questions coming in online right now. They're being slackers online.
Delaney, is that the right lens for this? For this distance? I don't know. I'm just asking. You want me to go first and then Delaney?
We can do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so this is that tool I was talking about that can show you how big 0.03 millimeters is. So this is one of my caliper sets, and what it does is it measures distance. It measures the gaps between these jaws, and it displays it in a nice digital format there. So I'm to calculate 0.03 millimeters. Let's see here. Let me change over to that, zero it out, and oop. This is very hard to get. Oh, right there. No, 0.4. Okay, it's right on the edge of 0.3, 0.4. That's 0.03 millimeters. Not that little gap you can actually see through. It's literally that gap between these jaws, right? This section of the jaws right here, where you literally can't actually see anything. I can just see a little light when I hold it up to the light. I can see a little bit of light creeping through those jaws.
I don't think you could floss that.
That'd have to be some really, really thin floss. Yeah. So something that small has to be filtered out of drip emitters. That's how small you have to deal with it, or else it's going to clog your system over time. So that's just a wonderful visual demonstration. The other things we're going to show over here is I've got a jar test, which is going to show how it's a way for you guys to test when you're adding soil amendments out into the field. It's a way for you to test it before you do it, so that you don't potentially cause problems for your system. That's a little more in depth. So first we can go through and demonstrate some of the components we've talked about. This is drip tape, and this is from that GK1000 that we were talking about. It lays flat when it's closed or when it's off, and then when it's on, it inflates a little bit, and then water comes and drips out of these emitters that are spaced every, that's about 12 inches. And it's not just a hole that goes straight down. You can actually see there's some pattern beneath here. It's called a disturbed or a distressed pattern route. It's a little labyrinth, so the water comes up here and actually makes it through this tiny little labyrinth, and that's what builds the pressure that actually causes it to be a pressurized system.
Can you make sure that we can see it on the camera and that everybody else can see it on this side as well?
Yep. So there's the emitters. You can see beneath that you can just see the outline of the disturbed path beneath it. But this is the type of hose that you'll lay out, and this is one of the attachment pieces. So this is the header hose. This is the drip hose that the water is flowing through this, trying to get here where it can actually get distributed. There are drip irrigation systems that use just this, and then you can puncture it and put in sprinkler heads. But this one is designed to, you puncture a hole in here, then you insert this. It catches, it's got a little catch, it catches inside and holds itself in. And then all you do is stick it on there, make sure it's a good tight seal, and screw this down. And when that's punched in there, then that actually gives you a valve. You just turn that on, and that would be flowing water. And so the water's coming down through your hose, down through this section of the hose, and then out. And you do have limits on this, actually. You can only have, it's either 300 or 500 feet is how long you can make a lateral. Because of the pressure requirements, typically you lose, if I remember my number correctly, you lose 2/3 of your pressure within the first half of a lateral. So there are limitations on how long a lateral can actually be. The lateral is the line that's actually going out into the field, supplying the water directly to the
So
crops.
there's the parts of that are the main and then the lateral?
The main is the main is the main pipe that's flowing the water, and then you have the sub-mains, which are the smaller pipes that are distributing it out to the laterals. So you have laterals, the sub-mains, the mains, and then manifolds are different words. There's a lot of different interchangeable words, like with a lot of farming stuff. There's a ton of different interchangeable words that make it very confusing, unfortunately.
So if I wanted to get out to this thing in the field, well, where would I start with that thing to get to this thing? And what might it be?
Well, you need to run get your main hose to however far it's going to go, to the field. Get your main hose to the field. Get your water supply to the start of the field in whatever fashion that is. Some people, that's literally a tank on a truck. They have to drive a water tank to the field because they don't actually have a well or a pipe or a stick.
And it also could be a well with a pumping.
Yeah, it can be. Or if the well's a little ways away, you may have 1,000 feet of hose or pipe that's running from the well to the field. We've seen that. So there's various methods for getting the water to the field, and then you get a system like this, maybe some PVC. Get the water out to the field and hook these systems up to where the water is actually running out the laterals. But there's
So we might go from the main to a sub-main.
Maybe you might not need a sub-main. You might just have a main.
Might or might not need a sub-main, and then the laterals.
Yep, you'll have to have the laterals, and then that's if it's still a lateral, even if it's a sprinkler system. So, there's the piping and the runs that support those sprinklers. That's still considered a lateral at that point. Next, we have this is a filter, and I believe also a backflow prevention system for the GK1000. This is a pressure regulator. This actually drops down the pressure for the system, but then this here is a small filter. And this unscrews like that.
Would it filter out at 0.03?
That is I think so. That's a pretty fine mesh. I don't know what mesh count this is. I don't know if it's a 3 or a 400, but that is a very, very fine mesh. I mean, you can see the holes are basically, you can't even see them. So maybe I just have to check the specs on it exactly. But for that, as you saw, I just pulled that out, and to clean your filter, you just pull that out and hose it off with the hose. Filter's clean. But another good example of why you want a filter is I just had this happen to me a few weeks ago. I was trying to replace the hose head on my garden hose. The deposits, the mineral deposits from the city of Jackson's water had deposit welded the pieces together. I literally had to rip them apart with heavy tools, and it broke it in the process, but I just wanted to see what had happened. It had minerals had built up and welded them together. So filter, and it's not like that's an expensive thing to get. I just had to get a new garden hose and a new head, but still kind of a pain.
That mesh there with that drip system you was talking about was buried. You could use that as well to put it around it and let the water still.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different ways you can. There's a very large array of different filters, and people are constantly making their own little adaptations of them. There's, that's the nice thing about the drip and micro-irrigation world is it got built up so big that there's basically anything you have a question, there's probably an answer for it.
Which is the black backflow protection?
This would likely be the backflow prevention system. And I do not remember exactly how this section of the manifold works. I do know, though, that I think this is one of the spots that you can add potentially an amendment. You can either add an amendment here, or this is also to flush it. This could be to flush the system, but it also might be where you add an injector.
Explain what that is, Dex, further.
Yeah, actually that's for sure. That's absolutely where you add the fertilizer injector. So, and that's why you would want your backflow prevention. So you have, and we didn't get it with the GK1000, it's an additional little thing, but it's a bottle that you mix your fertilizer in, your dry flowable, whatever type of fertilizer, or whatever soil amendment it is, and then you hook up this small hose to it, and that's actually how, so the water would run through here normally, but when you're doing fertilizer, so the system's hooked up, fertilizer is ready to go, but it's not running yet. Water is already running through the system. You close this valve, you open this valve, and now the water is moving through and pulling it out and sending it down. So this actually does not have a backflow prevention system as far as I can see.
I think it's 155 mesh, by the way.
Ah, 155, okay. So that's a little bit lower. You'd probably want to go to 200, maybe 250 to get out that 0.3. But that's still a decently fine mesh. I mean, you saw it, it's a very fine mesh. But so that does not actually have a backflow prevention system as far as I can tell. But it does have the pressure regulator and the fertilizer injector option, as well as the filter. To demonstrate soil intake rates, I made up this little model. Obviously, we have sand here and then some wonderful clay from beneath my house where I have to battle with water and clay and shifting soil all the time. It's horrible. But this is to show you just what the difference between intake rate is and how much faster different types of soil are pulling the
Pipe
water.
over a little bit so that people over here can see a little clearer. Y'all may benefit a little more from being over here to see the 2 cups.
Yeah, I'll try and...
I see it every day. Go ahead.
So what are you demonstrating, Dex?
So this is the clay, and
All right,
this is the
that's fine.
salt, the sand that does have salt in it. But this is to demonstrate how different the intake rate is between these, which would help determine what type of maybe micro-irrigation system you need with different emitter spacings based on how quickly it absorbs water. So there we go with the clay. It's going to take a while to drink that. Oh, and here goes. And you can see from y'all's point of view, look how fast, I don't even have to slow down. Yep. Look how fast it makes its way through the sand profile. Yep, it's already draining. So, and the clay is actually doing pretty fast. That's faster than the last time I did this.
That's faster than usual.
Yeah, I didn't compress it as much this time.
There we go.
That was by hand with a mortar and pestle. I had to break up that clay by hand. But there, perfect example. That sand is taking water in so much faster. So the water is not going to spread out nearly as much if you have a wide spacing on your drip emitters. Clay, that's grabbing onto water and it's going to hold on to it it's going to take a long time for it to get to the bottom. It's going to take is equally long for it to get out. And I did want to say there was one thing about from the earlier presentation that was described correctly but wasn't demonstrated exactly the right way. Soil when it's dry is called, when it's truly dry is called oven dry. There is no water. But permanent wilting point, there's still water in the soil. There's still a lot of water in the soil at permanent wilting point. It's just not water that the plant can get. And it was described correctly in the previous presentation. It's just the graphic on there made it look like the soil's completely dry. Soil is not completely dry when you're at permanent wilting point. There's actually still a very large amount of water, but the soil will not let go of it. Not very easily, at least. It's going to be such a hard fight for the plant to get that water that it ends up hurting itself, damaging itself irreparably, fighting for that water. But yeah, that's just a neat little graphic demonstrating, because this would be oven dry. Well, no, actually, that was oven dry for sure because I dried it in the oven. This would be close to oven dry. It was not oven dry when I messed with it.
The infiltration is so weak on that.
Yep.
Still, yeah.
Yep. And that's our wonderful Yazoo clay that we have. There's a previous example of this. The first version of this is in my office right now. You can see most of the water is drained out and the clay's shrunk. The clay bloom in there has actually shrunk in from the sides of the container, even though originally it wasn't like that. Just a wonderful example of our Yazoo clay.
I think that happened to around my foundation at my house.
It did to mine. That's why my house shifted, and now I have to get it repaired. Yay, old house problems. But hi there. Thank you. Well, that's a good way to start talking about. Yeah, so that's our high tunnel model that demonstrates you don't want that happening on yours. That's why you lower the sidewalls in the wind, because it becomes a plane.
This drip.
Yeah.
Okay, so the water drips out of there, and you got it on top of the soil.
This one would be on top of the soil. No, actually, You can do this one on top of or below. I don't believe the kit says one, if you have to do one or the other. You can have buried drip lines. We have a machine actually at the Pineywood School that buries drip line for you and makes covered shaped beds. So you can bury drip line as long as the emitters are facing up, because that actually prevents it from clogging. It flushes it downstream. So this could be done in either orientation, and you could still potentially use this. And as an aside, this is how this is supposed to go. If I can get, yep.
And punching those holes are not easy.
Yeah, and you can see, look, I'm having to work to get this on here.
You showing that?
And you really need to make sure it's actually on, because if not, it will leak.
Yeah.
And you also need to make sure that you're, yeah, see, look, it still doesn't want to do it. But yeah, so you just tighten this down and it will, yeah, see, it really, oh, there we go, starting to move now. But something one of the other irrigation experts told us is you have to be careful if you cut these things and you don't give them nice square cuts. When you attach them to here, it doesn't provide a consistent seal around it, and then it will leak. And so some people will just go through with a pocket knife and, willy-nilly just cut, and then it's off at weird angles, and then they have to redo all those laterals. So, but that's just another example, and then you just hook those two like that, and then hook your hose line to that. If we had a water spigot here, we'd actually demonstrate it, but this building literally does not have a water spigot.
The PVC cutter, get a nice clean cut on there.
Yep, I do like the PVC cutters. And you can get them at Lowe's and Home Depot. But this next, the what? PVC cutters. The big plastic and metal cutters. This next demonstration is, it's called a jar test. And what it basically is supposed to do is if you're going to do a soil amendment fertilizer or whatever it is, this is something you do before you actually put it out in the field, so that if something goes wrong, you catch it before you potentially make a really costly mistake. So here's one version. That is a mixture of salt, water, and baking soda, which here's going to be the... Lee, can you hand me another bottle of water or two from over there?
Sure can.
So this demonstrates how particles separate in mixtures. So this is water, salt, and soda. So there's my water that I spilled. And here is my road salt, which I got from Lowe's, because next time it freezes, I'm going to put it out all on my front walk. That way we don't bust it when we go out to try and do stuff in the freeze. So there's some salt, and this will take a second to mix up. If it was warm water, it would go faster. Warm water usually helps this dissolve quicker. And yes, unfortunately, there is chemistry involved in irrigation. And I don't want to explain it because I don't remember it very well. I'd have to refresh myself on that. It's all about how the cations and anions work together dependent on the actual material you're injecting into your system and how it can cause clogging. And it's one of the things irrigation specialists have to do. Thank you. I don't like causing a mess. All right, that's a fair bit of the particles dissolved. There's still a good bit of salt in there, but a lot of it's gone. So now we just take a little bit of baking soda and boop. So these are the exact same mixtures now. Maybe different ratios, but that's the difference. That literally exact same ingredients in each one, but this one has had time to separate out. Mm-hmm. And this is what can happen with something you're trying to inject in your field. Now, if you have this solution in a water tank for, maybe a transplanter or something, well, that's not really gonna work your solution is now nowhere near evenly distributed, and when you're trying to put that out in the field, it's really going to do a poor job of, actually getting what you're trying to get out in the field in there. So you would do this jar test, but with your actual, what you're trying to put out in the field, with your actual soil amendments. You'd put the water in there and the soil amendment in the recommended dosage. You'd read the label, and for this size jar, you'd say, okay, I'm going to put this much water and this much of that amendment in there. I'm going to test it.
I'm trying to see what we're doing. We're taking our own soil.
No, you won't. You don't use soil. You won't use soil for this. But this is, you'll take these jars, and when you buy like your fertilizer that you plan to put out in the field,
Oh, okay.
you'll put the recommended amount of fertilizer and water for this size jar together, mix it up. Any chemicals that you're all going to mix together at once, you mix them all in the same jar in exactly the same way that you're planning to put it out in the field, just to see what it does.
Oh.
To see if it maintains a uniform structure. The other one is...
What do you do if it doesn't?
You look at either changing the ingredients, changing the mixtures, changing the application methods. That might be more of a question for our soil scientists or one of our more experienced farmers, actually. But I can show one that's a little more demonstrative of how bad a clog can be, or how bad it can be if you do it wrong. So this one is water, and where is my vinegar? And yes, this is definitely strange. Vinegar, and then my heavy whipping cream. And I know these are all strange ingredients, but the idea is they behave in the same way that different types of liquid injectable items on the farm will behave inside irrigation systems and farm equipment. So if I mix that up, what it's going to do over time when I let it sit is it is going to form this. This is the one I already did. Ooh, it's not that bad, but you can see if you look in here, it has formed clumps.
Yeah.
And what it can do in worst scenarios is form much bigger, stickier clumps. If you're using this mixture in a sprinkler system, that's going to clog the sprinkler system, and now you have to manually take the sprinkler system off and clean off every single one that had that gunk in it. So that's why you do the jar test beforehand.
So just so everyone is clear, yeah, I think everybody understands this, but just in case anybody doesn't, what we was talking about is with this using a fertilizer injector system. So we're injecting chemical fertilizer into here and running that through the system. And if we're not careful about the ratios, and if we're not flushing the system, if we're not charging it first and then flushing it after, we're going to end up with a lot of residue within that will start to, over time, pretty quickly, change all the math, everything you've been thinking about, and what you think you're getting out of your irrigation system, you're actually going to be getting different results. And it's just going to be because your equipment is not what it once was, right? Because it hasn't been taken care of.
Well, and the other one, which there's two more we can do. One, I can just tell you if we don't want to do it. It's the basic baking soda and vinegar. What happens when we mix baking soda and vinegar together? So the same thing can happen with different agricultural chemicals. And if you do that inside of a tank that's closed off, you can potentially produce harmful gases that, one, can either rupture a tank, rupture your irrigation system, or if it's the right chemistry and a spark is applied, can blow up.
And one of the things in, like I say, baking soda, what does it contain? Bicarbonate. So it's going to fizz. It's going to have that carbon fizz, and
You spray in your little plants for bugs, because they say in vinegar and water.
right.
Well, and this is a different one. This is
So that was a retardant.
Vinegar and water?
It don't last.
Yeah, and there's actually,
Your plants with vinegar.
Deter.
well, and there's, for weed control, James was just talking about it
Maybe
yesterday.
it's not
You
awful.
can use a type of, it's agricultural vinegar. I think it's a little bit stronger. It suppresses weeds and grasses that you don't want growing near your crops. Strong smell. They do it out at Piney Woods a bit. But this next demonstration is demonstrating what's called an adjuvant, which I'm not the chemistry expert, so I don't have all my, and Lee might actually know a little bit, maybe, I don't want to put him on the spot. But an adjuvant is essentially a compound that you can buy, and there's different ones, but it's a type of compound, that's not the brand name. Adjuvant's not the brand name, that's just what it's classified as. But it's a type of compound that's designed to basically enhance or boost the power or the solution you're making. So in this case, my adjuvant's actually going to be dish soap. So what happens when I mix oil and water? It separates. It does not, they never want to get along. Well, what happens when I put an adjuvant in there and then mix it? Obviously it becomes a big soapy mess, but hey, all my oil bubbles are gone. It actually helped mix it, and that's the point of an adjuvant, is it's going to help marry those two chemicals or potentially boost the positive outcomes of it. But again, that's something you can do in a jar test to test before you put it out on the field and see if it's going to work before you potentially make a costly mistake. But I think that's really it for all my demonstrations. We can see now, it's a good time to circle back. Look, most of the surface water has absorbed into the sand and is really drained out. And we haven't even, we're getting close to the bottom with the clay, but it hadn't infiltrated all the way yet. It's still not there. So we'll see. It'll be fun to come back at the very end of this and see how far we get and when the whole thing is over. So I think at this point I'll stop rambling and give it over to Delaney.
Okay,
Oh yeah. Here, let's move the jars.
You can't pick it up.
let's follow up on what we talked about. Yeah, picnic lunch. Let's follow on what we talked about earlier. One of the things we were talking about was infiltration and water movement down through the soil medium. And we talked about three different mineral fractions. We talked about sand, we talked about silt, we talked about clay. Okay, and sand alone, what do we say? It was not good alone. And one of the reasons is being that it's a system that filters, but it's a poor filter, and by being a poor filter, you have water that moves right through it, and it does not stay around long enough in order for a plant roots to absorb it. And we're looking at just a sand size fraction. And sand is the most coarsest mineral fraction in the soil texturing grade. And what we see, looking at it, sand, we don't see any loose water or any running water. Okay, but what did it do? It filtered right down through the medium.
So in other words, you have soil that has a high concentrate of sand, instead of staying with the ground, it will go to the bottom.
It would go to the bottom, and it would filter right out through the system, and it would not stay around long enough for plant root uptake.
Also, the root system itself will not have anything to grow into.
Well, the root system would not be able to extract the nutrients or moisture from the grain. Now we can see free water that's being released from the from that sand. Once it got saturated, now what it had to do, all the pores had to become filled, right? We said when it's saturated, this is free water. This is not capillary water, this is free water. And once all the pores became filled, then you have free water that's moving out of the system. And free water moving away and out of the system is moving away from plant roots opportunity to extract it or get in the nutrients. And also it's moving to a system, a area where you have a concern for erosion because your material is moving, okay?
A question over there. Yeah, I was going to ask you, what happens when there's a little relief?
When
There's a little slope on that land.
a little slope, then what do we have? We have a little slope, erosion, that's it. We have erosion problem. But what it had to do, in order for that free water to be released, all the pores had to become filled and then once that happened, then we saw free water that moved off. And we see that that's a concern right there. Okay, let's look at the other fraction. We're looking at something that has 60% or more clay. This is clay. This is what we say it's the other extreme. We saw water was taken and absorbed by sand, but look at what happens to clay. Once it gets there, it's not going in, it's going to run off. Take for instance, this is a rainfall going down on this clay. And what we have is runoff. So, sand, almost 100% sand. You have infiltration. It does not contain the sand, water. The water just goes right through it and it becomes free water and is not available to the plants. Okay, you have with clay, you have runoff. And then you have movement where water did not penetrate or become permeable in that soil material, in this clod, so it ran off and then it's still not available to the plant because it's just runoff. It's erosion. Okay. We have another clod of material. Which this is a more loamier type of texture. And we can see where you have your surface, you have your roots, but at the same time, you're gonna have what water absorb. It's absorbed more than the first two. Water gets into the material and it's absorbed, and you have a better permeability, you have better infiltration, and you have a good opportunity right now as far as the loamy material. We looked at the textural triangle back on the presentation. We looked at, like I say, 50% sand, 30% silk, and 50% sand, 30% silk, clay, and then 20% silk. So that gives us pretty much a sandy clay loam, or silty clay loam. Okay, so that's the type of material that you desire for a good agricultural production. This type of material here, it's loamy, it has good root penetration, it absorbs real easily, and also it has good root distribution. And it's what color is it? It's a darker color. So it has what we call contribute darker colors. Organic matter content. So you're looking at those three factors. You have your organic matter, you have your good textural mix, sand, silt, and clay, and pretty much that combination. And also you have good material where you have good pore space, you have good soil structure. Another thing we talked about was soil structure. And in order to have good soil structure, what we said, it was the texture was the amount of sand, silt, and clay particles in the soil that make up. But then the structure is the way they are arranged. Okay, we have a clod here. Okay, that clod can subdivide into other fragments, all size structures. We start out with what we call a blocky structure. Then we call it started breaking into angular blocky structures. Okay, so that makes it good for absorption and also good root distribution. We see roots all the way down it, okay? We see roots throughout. We see large roots. We see medium-sized roots. We see roots that are interacting with the, we're gonna clean the carpet up there.
Not it.
Yeah, remember where the farm.
Well, if you look real close, you see the roots. They're running along the faces of these aggregates. It's not running right through the aggregates. They're running along the zone of least resistance. You see that root right there. That's probably some you can see, but we can show you better ones. But that's where the roots tend to run. That's why we say it needs good aggregation, good pore space, good porosity, and good opportunity for water movement and air movement. So, and also the roots like that too, because it's the area of least resistance. And you have that good makeup in your soil medium, then you're gonna have a good, healthy crop system because you don't have any little restriction of root penetration, root distribution. And your roots need to move from downward. It's like to move vertically. And that's what we're seeing in this particular material here.
Say you have a mixture of clay and loamy soil. What would be a good depth to chop up or?
We say 10 to 12 inches. You're looking at your topsoil, then you're looking at probably about another 8 inches down below that. You need to try to have that good depth in order to have, for most crops, most vegetable crops, you need to have that. But the deeper the better, but generally on most, in general speaking, you need to have at least a foot of good material that roots can have least resistance moving down. And you need to have some type of resistance, which is your clay content build up, because it needs to have a retention where you can have that water retained at that depth. And when the roots get down, it needs to have somewhat able to, water to be able to extract moisture from that soil. So you need to have some type of restriction. Like you have the sand on top, and you want to have, if you have sand, you want to have some type of material down below in order for roots to be able to have connection with and have a relationship with, that they can extract nutrients from that particular material. Because like we're saying, when the roots go down, they interface with the soil material, and they have that relationship, that connection, where they are extracting the nutrients from the soil. So when we talk about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, we want that to be available along these soil beds, these soil aggregates, in order for it to be able to easily extract it. And you need to have the right moisture content, you need to have the right textural capacity to retain those roots. Now in sand, you do not have those surface areas. Sand is more or less grit, quartz. Do not look at that or associate that with good surface area for nutrients retention, because nutrients do not attach themselves good with sand, with quartz. Well, they do with clay particles. But now clay particles, smaller particles, but they have that surface area that we talked about, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium compounds or anions that soils, that plants need in order to be able to get their nutrients from. So this is the correct makeup, a loamy material that has good texture, a mix of sand, silt, and clay, in order for to have good medium for plant growth. Okay, and we also said that in order to have that, what we say we need a good organic matter. Organic matter, what did we say organic matter was? Leaves, twigs, plant matter, plant residue. Okay, and then this is what the microbes, they like to serve and to break down this, decompose it. Now this is still identifiable. You can tell it was straw, roots, twigs, or leaves, but at the same time, they're gonna further decompose this. Now this is just the first stage of decomposition. But over time, they'll break this on down. You can't tell what it originated from, whether it was leaves, twigs, roots, or whatever. But at the same time, This is the early stage of decomposition of organic material, okay? And they extract the carbon. There's still carbon content in this material. That's what the microbes be seeking, that carbon. They decompose, they eat this, they extract the carbon for their energy, and then in turn, the energy they extract, then that's what they use in order to convert this organic material to inorganic material in order for plants to take it up. If that process didn't take place, then you wouldn't have that availability of your nutrients in the soil, and then you would still have to use commercial fertilizers from the market. Okay. Well, this takes over time, and probably you're looking at a seasonal type.
I mean, for individual, for instance, I'm trying to do that. How often will I flip the ingredients that I have, leaves, etc.?
Oh, you're talking about like a composting type. Well, you every 7 to 10 days or something like that, in order for it to breathe. Turn. Right, they probably.
What I read, every 7 to 10 days you turn it, but make sure you also spray water on it. Don't let it get too dry. But not to make it wet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But now left alone, Mr. Payton, this is a composting system of its own, because it's not as fast or rapid as you would do in a composting system. But at the same time, it's the same process, the same concept. It's a decomposition of plant remains, whatever type of material, whether it's tabletop material that you're using to compost. It's a breakdown of that system and decomposition of that material to convert it from organic into inorganic to non-living, in order to make it nutrients, in order for compounds, in order for plants to take it up. Okay.
This is the exact same theory behind cover crops.
Yes, we want to use cover crops in order to, on top of that, with cover crops, you want to have live roots in the ground at all times throughout the year. And then it's at the end of the season, you have that termination of decomposition of cover crops in order that makes that material available for plant uptake. Same thing with cover crops and stuff.
This is called residue.
Residue.
So have y'all heard residue management? Anyone heard of that? That's an NRCS practice where they will, it's another cost sharing practice where after you have a cover crop, then you manage that residue. You use that in there as a cover to do exactly this, to provide a cover for the ground, to help retain moisture and to prevent raindrops from actually hitting the ground itself too, which can cause erosion and displacement. So this is just another, it's the exact same process that's happening after the covers have been terminated.
Yeah, at a slower natural rate, but it's the same concept. It's the
I know I'm thinking here, but crop rotation. Just a little bit, if you don't mind backtracking.
Crop rotation.
Let's get to that.
Okay.
Right. We're gonna finish Dex's part of the irrigation, and then we're gonna go talk about crop rotation for the remainder.
Okay. Then one other thing while you're here, you want to look at, we talk about root distribution and soil compaction depth. We see all types of roots in this oak plants here, and we see roots. We see some larger, we see some smaller, but they're all trying to adapt themselves, acquaint themselves with the soil material, in order to extract nutrients from it, because this is the medium that it depends upon for their survivability. And you see, pretty much they are trying to go down. Most of these roots are going vertical. You see some of them are fibers. Now the ones that are going vertical, they are trying to get to water. The ones that are fibrous, they are trying to extract nutrients. So each root, believe it or not, has its own, like in the bee colony. You have some workers, you have some, the queens, you have some, everyone has its own specified role and responsibility in the development of this plant shoot here. If this didn't happen down below ground, would nothing happen above ground. So we're looking at this whole system here on how it has its own specialized responsibilities and roles in order for this plant to grow up and then start bearing fruit, nuts, or whatever the type of harvest is. So we're looking at a system here, not just a plant, but it's a system. Even our human body, it's a system. There's no standalone, one is important than the other. If the roots wasn't doing their job, the plant couldn't do its job. So we're looking at, and also what they rely on is good, healthy soil material, good, healthy ground, and that's what we are trying to help establish. And the soil itself is a system, a natural living body. And we see all around here, we see where microbes are active, but we can't see them, but they are active in this particular soil medium here. And at the same time, we look at this as sand, soil, silt, sand, and clay, but at the same time, it's holding all those microbes in that environment in order for them to be able to function and do what they do. So you're looking at that as far as it's how things operate. And you're looking at one other thing, and we'll let you go. We say something had to retain water and moisture above where your roots are. In order for roots to extract it, this moisture has to be retained for an amount of time in order for roots to extract it. Okay, so therefore you have moisture, like Dex was saying, you have moisture all around these soil clods, but you can't see it. But the roots can, because it's being able to use a capillary fringe, that gravitational pull, in order to extract moisture from this soil material. If this is not the right material, this is more or less clay material, then it will be harder to extract.
So 50% of that is air and water?
Yeah, 25% air, 25% water.
50% of what he's holding right in his hand right there is air and water.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And 45% is what you see. That's the 45% of what you're looking at. What we say that 45% is made of? The mineral fraction.
The sand, the silt,
And clay. Yeah, that's the 45% that you see.
and the organic.
Yeah, that's the 45. And organic is 5%, right? But it's that's what you can see is the mineral part. But you can't see the organic part. And the organic part is, like I say, millions and millions of microbes that are responsible for breaking down this type of material in order to have good, healthy plant and growing environment for plant production. Okay, and then the only other thing we have is when you see what we say, in order for life to restart again, some has to die. Okay, we see this grass mat here is pretty relatively dead, but it had to do this in order for, and what caused it to die? Well, it has its own lifespan anyway, but when it dies, what happens to our bodies? We start decomposing, deteriorating and stuff. So it has to deteriorate in order to bring on new life. This life had to end in order for another life to begin, right? So we look at that, and we're looking at the whole makeup here. We see root systems and everything, but at the same time, it's just turning into a different form. It's a energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Energy is energy. It just converts to a different form. Okay, but plants utilized it in order to for their own strength and survivability, in order to bring on new life. Like in our bodies, we die, and then and our body converts to a different source, mineral, but the energy is gone somewhere, right? But at the same time, we're looking at soil itself, that it is a system that is a dynamic natural system. Where we say dynamic is ever changing, and it never stays the same. It continues to move. So it converts from this material here, and it develops into something else. But some energy source had to be at present at work in order for that to happen. So our biological community, our microbial community, microorganisms, they're the ones, the catalysts that make this happen. In order for the decomposition, the converting to inorganic material, in order for a new life to take advantage of it, to take it up and be able to start a new generation. So that is the whole life cycle of the soil itself. is a living, dynamic, natural system that's capable of supporting plant life. If it can't do that, then it's not soil, right? It has to have that definition, it has to meet that definition. Like in any situation, we talked about the parent material, we talked about the bedrock earlier this morning. Okay, that's not soil yet. It's not, it don't produce plant life. But it's the beginning, it's the building blocks of soil. It's the beginning of what is to come. And that takes time, but at the same time, we have to understand in that concept, if we're gonna be good stewards of our land and natural resources and being able to look at it for our sustainability as a human and mankind, we're gonna have to be able to have a different understanding and appreciation for that natural resource. Yeah, but that's pretty much what we had in order to kind of shed some light on the fundamentals of where we want to go with soil health and sustainability and being able to appreciate the soil and not having to use so much outside external commercial amendments, fertilizers, chemicals. Soil can be able to sustain itself if given time and if using the right principles and concepts applied, then it can be able to sustain itself and also sustain our survival as human life as we know it.
So that soil does not need any fertilizer, the one with the balanced mixture.
Well, it needs fertilizer as is, but if we start applying soil health practices, it can start decomposing, and this be converted into what we look at right here, into organic.
That one doesn't need it. It's got everything it needs.
It has everything it needs, but at the same time, it just need to be terminated every year on an annual basis. This live material, when it dies, it needs to be terminated and then converted by microorganisms into this type of material here, and then it decomposes and starts in this dark color, which is organic matter content. And then you're on the road then to building your organic carbon content, and then your microbes start operating, generating natural fertilizer into the soil that you would minimize the need for commercial fertilizers.
It's like when you're using the cover crops like that and in a crop rotation, it's like you're going to the bank and making deposits. And there's a cost to growing the cash crops. And not a financial cost, but there's a cost in terms of making sure it's got the right, a calibration of NPK within it, right? So you know what this cost is, and that cost is going to vary by product. It's going to vary from tomatoes to blueberries. They're going to be different. So what you can do with the different kinds of cover crops and the different ways of managing them, in addition to doing pest control with them and weed suppression with them and disease management with them, you are also able to start putting money in the bank. Putting them in the piggy bank a little bit to build up. And if you're doing green manures, what it's called, or you're doing cowpeas over the summer or a vetch over the winter. You're doing things like that where you are taking nutrients and you're putting them in that piggy bank, Now, depending upon how you terminate them, and you do have to pay attention to this. You have to do it in the right way because those nutrients can still leach too, right? So you have to take care of that to make sure you preserve everything that you put in there. And you may still have to add a little extra money to buy that crop, but you're much, much closer than you were before. And over time, the studies generally show that you pay less. Then that it's going to cost you less to produce that than you would if you were just buying it outright with all of the non-natural kinds of fertilizer.
Right. Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, this is
Say that?
going to help you keep money in your pocket, more or less. You don't have to spend as much as you would if you just tried to do the conventional farming, like you were saying that you bare ground. Okay, it's not being productive. It's not generating any nutrients. So something's got to be paid out in order for it to get to where it needs to be in order to produce your next spring crop. So therefore you got to come out your pocket. Whereas with this type of operation, you can have less expenses out of your pocket and more because you use a natural system that already has, you're taking advantage of the natural nutrient management system that the soil can provide for you. Yes.
On what surface should you put your compost ingredients on? Flat surface, red ground?
Well, composting, it's a system that it's generating itself. You can have it above ground, but you're looking at the microbes, they are eating and digesting and decomposing that litter. This type of litter, that's what it's not soil yet.
Right.
They don't act on soil itself, but they act on the decomposition of natural litter. Leaves, twigs, grass cuttings, grass clippings, all that stuff.
Is it carbonated matter, carbon matter? Anything with a carbon base, they could.
Yes, that's what they're extracting, the carbon source. That's their food. It's the carbon source. That's the way they get their food, like we eat protein like meat, and we eat fiber like vegetables, and we look at that as our food source, as our energy. So the microbes, they look at carbon as our food source and energy in order to be able to generate and convert the living matter decomposition into an organic matter, which the plants can be able to uptake. So that's what their whole life cycle is to eat and decompose, and then what they emit as far as their digestive system, their poop, if you want it. That's what they use in order to get back into the soil, and then it is available to plants in that form, right?
One question, do you cover the compost or leave it uncovered?
You cover it to generate that temperature, to maintain that.
We're trying to get it to 140 degrees.
140 some degrees in order for it to incubate, in order to for the microbes to see. Microbes, as they digest stuff, they emit gas. Our digestive system formulates gas as it emits. So and the gas is what is captured by the plants.
Does it come with board, wood, tin, what, plastic?
Well, something is hard for the temperature to escape. You want it to be some type of material that is, captures and retains the heat buildup. You don't want the heat
one standard for it. I think necessarily for compost.
Wood would probably be fine since it's such a good thermal insulator. Wood would probably be really good since it's such a good thermal insulator.
Okay, that's always taught in school that
You use a tarp.
I mean, that would work too.
Wood. Where do you find compost?
everything that comes out.
And while David's setting back up, I did fact check myself about the birth of agriculture. It is about 10,000 years ago. But David might have seen a new study. Maybe it is newer. You know, that's kind of the fun thing about all this type of information is it updates much faster than people think. And usually the academic community is actually about 25. The trickle down from the academic community to the public is about 25 years. That on average. I remember when I first got to college, the story was still, you know, growing up, we all learned humans first came to America about 10,000 years ago. That was the same story being told when I got to college. By about senior year of college, it was actually, no, we have new studies that say there was probably earlier migrations, 25, 30, maybe even 40,000 years ago that have been successive waves. So that was just in a span of 4 years, that information updated. So this information is constantly updating. And it's just, you gotta pay attention as it trickles down through the academic community.
Dude. And as Dex, right before we get back into that, we have a couple of other gentlemen up here that may have some additional thoughts on what we were just talking about back here with the soil and the infiltration and the cover crops, and we were talking about crop rotations a second ago. Is there anything based upon what we were just talking about that you may want to add on to?
I'm gonna say, well, Delaney did my job for me since we both the soils guys, so I think he knocked out the soils portion real nice.
And then there are 2 slides in here that are crop rotations that I think y'all
I
should
think what a
use
lot of
when we get
people
to it.
is trying to put in perspective is the crop rotation, how it go from your main crop to the
Covers?
to how without composting, you let it compost on itself where it stays, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
do you rake it all up and then you put it in the compost pile? Or
Well, what we do in crop fields,
Yeah.
we plant cover crops for the winter time.
correct.
Then we terminate them.
And you just leave it.
How
And
do
just
you
leave-
determine that?
Oh, that's what.
All right,
That was your process, you cut it, let it stay there?
y'all gonna be upset.
They ain't gonna like the answer.
Glyphosate, Roundup.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, you can't do that.
Well, they do. That's how they terminate cover crops.
But do you have to terminate the cover crop?
If you don't have a specialized planter, some people use a crimper. They roll it, they crimp it down, and they have a mulched till type tiller that goes in there and planter. It tills it up and plants it right into the cover. But you have to have the right type of cover crops for it to do it like that. Cereal rye is good, but you cannot plant corn in cereal rye. Because it has indified in it that kills the corn. So you have to know kind of things like that to be able to do it correctly.
Well, okay, I read somewhere when you have a cover crop, you have to keep cutting it low before it harvest time, so it won't produce seeds. You keep cutting it low and you have like a collector, a bagger. You have to keep doing that. So
Well, you
still
can.
working.
You can do that, but what I do in my place, I let it go to seed before I cut it, before I bush hog. Now I just bush hog it, and I till it in.
Is there a chance that it could grow in with your crop?
Not where the heat gets up 80, 90 degrees,
Your crop, that's right.
it's not gonna come back.
So this gets in, it's really, it is complicated. And I would say that even though this is part of our intention today, there's a lot, we've covered a lot of material. We're gonna need to do another workshop just on cover crops and crop rotations, because it could take, a day as well. It's really, it's complex, and it has to be managed, but it's absolutely doable. And I think once people get kind of an idea of the system, they can, you can make it work. But you always have to ask why. Why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this cover crop? Is the main purpose of it to build up nutrients, to build, to build it in, or is it really to help the organic matter, or is it for more pest control and disease prevention? Cover crops are an essential part of your integrated pest management program. An essential part of it.
It sounds like the cover crops would change as your soil management grows, right? So the better your soil gets, you might have to alternate, on the off season, your cover crop. You might not need one for nutrients. You might need one to protect for whatever.
Erosion, yep.
Well, there's some general theories in this, and there are different theories too. But it's like there's the legume family, and then the nightshade family, and the root crop family, and the cruciferous family, right? And so they each do different kinds of things, and so typically people will choose a sequence, within that, where you are taking something like cowpeas that are a legume that are going to put a lot of nitrogen into the field. you know, and then you've got another crop like lettuce that really might need a lot of, or other kinds of leafy greens, they might need a lot of nitrogen. So those things you would plant, you know, next to one another, you know, and then within the whole system, you want to think about adding root crops of different kinds because they benefit your soil structure. All right, so they really get down in there and help aerate the soil, and then the crops that follow them, they don't have to work as hard to get their roots down there. So that is kind of the strategy for rotating these crops around. Within that, you know, and we will come back to this, I promise, and talk about this in an extended session. Yeah. But the thing that makes it both complex and also really, really exciting is that when you look at that, now you can start thinking about companion planting, right? So what plants go well with others? Which ones, you know, can you plant either, you know, a row and a row, or in between rows, or even within the same row? And then when you want to think about, okay, well, I'm gonna, while this is harvesting out, I'm gonna go ahead and overseed my cover crop right into this, you know, and have those things growing together. So you're talking about different processes for intercropping, you know, and developing your beneficials within this. So that, you know, with the companions, the whole idea is, it's not all just cash crops, you know, it's like, you know, you're thinking about, you know, the smell of the crops too. Do these attract, you know, certain kinds of insects? And the covers, you know, do they create in their residue, do they create a certain nectar that a lot of beneficials are going to stay for, right? They're going to stay for that, and they're going to consume that. And if the timing is right, they will then be able to move over from the cover, right, that has been decaying right into the new plant, you know, the beneficials. And they will act as a natural deterrent, right, to the natural pest for that, right? So these are the kinds of things that we want to ultimately come back and talk about, you know, thinking about those rotation strategies and how to develop an ecosystem that is greater than just, I'm growing I'm growing a row. I've got a bed of this end. I've got a bed of that end. Because now you're thinking about the filter strips and, you know, what you're putting in on your field borders here. And you're thinking about how you're treating the whole of the land. So you always kind of have something on it. You know, that's the goal.
Yeah.
Is there anything y'all want to add?
Yes, and one key point is, when we say crop rotation, we're not talking, if you got 4 cells that you have on your farm, we're talking about that same cell that's what's rotated on it. Each cell is kind of had its own identity, and that from that standpoint. If you had squash on it this year, then you rotated, had a cool season cover crop, then what do you replace that same field with rotated on that same cell, whether it's peas or whether it's cucumbers, whether it's whatever, then rotate it with a cool season again. You talk about that identity of that same cell being rotated on. And then each cell has its own identity. You might want to put squash on this cell this year, then transfer it to another cell, but what do you put back on this same cell to try to reestablish that rotation on it? And we're talking about rotation of that same piece of ground over and over and over.
Yeah. Then like my grandfather used to do, every 7 years, let it be fallow.
Yeah.
Don't plant anything on it.
That's right. You let that rest.
Let it rest.
Yeah. There are a lot of theories about using 4-year rotations. And one of the reasons for that is because there are a lot of diseases that can live in your soil, soil-borne diseases that can stay there for up to 5 years. So depending on what you've grown there, and you might have a disease develop, it could take a long time to get rid of it. So you may not want to bring a crop that's susceptible to that disease back to that space until it's had time to mature its way out of there.
Yeah.
You know, and in that farmscaping interview with Justin Duncan, one of the things that he talked about that I think was really fascinating is when it comes to controlling disease and when it comes to controlling pests, you know, especially let's think about pests in this respect, you know, the biggest weapons you have are distance and time. Those are the biggest weapons you have, right? Distance and time. So when you grow something in a particular place, pests are going to want to come back to that. That's where they're going to want to be. Hey, we fed on this here, we're going to feed on it again. That's where diseases are going to be, all right? So they get in that soil. So what do? Well, you move, you plant something over here, or you wait. The more obstacles in terms of space or time that you build over there, oh, those pests have to go through something else. Mm-hmm. They have to go through something that smells in a way that they don't like, or they have to go through this, which has a whole bunch of beneficials that are going to want to prey on them. So you're putting things in between,
And
right?
Soil amendments do the same thing. If you reuse the same soil amendment over and over and over and over again, pests build a tolerance to it, and it becomes completely ineffective. So varying the type of soil amendment you might use on the crop, in addition to moving location and exactly where it's planted, and letting it fallow.
This is a great point. It's a great point. And along with that, you may not know that you also, if you are using chemicals, you need to rotate your pesticides. So that's something that a lot of people don't really know or appreciate. They go out and they use their pesticides and they use it. I'm using the same thing every year, every time. Well, that's not good, because what are you putting out? Whatever you're spraying is building up an immunity to that. All right. So there are other things that, and there's a whole list. And we're putting a database out there. And Dex worked really hard on this, but we've have got this that we will put out for you so you can look at it, you can see it. It's available through the Southeast Vegetable Crop Handbook, but sometimes that information is a little hard to penetrate into.
It's a lot.
But we're putting it out there where you can see it, basically, and you can understand that there are pesticide families, right? So that there are chemical families and there are fungicide families, so that there's a key ingredient in here, but you can use something else, right, that does the same purpose, right, but it's not in the exact same family. So the immunity will not be built up. So whether you're using chemicals or whether you're using other kinds of barriers, this is something that ultimately, that PhD idea comes in. You have to scout your field. You have to observe. You have to look at what's going on, and then make sure, just because you see some bugs on a leaf, that doesn't mean you want to go and kill it. Because that thing, that ladybug or whatever else is there, may be doing exactly the thing you need for it to protect that plant. So you got to scout, you got to record what you're seeing, get those, get people's insight into that. What is this? What is this? You have to know what the predators are for that crop. And then what can you do about it? What time? Because it's also not just so cut and dry. It's not, it's not like 1 = 1. It's like you've got a crop, and it will become susceptible to disease or susceptible to pests depending upon where it is in its growth stage, right? So at certain stages, it's not going to be susceptible. Or you get to a certain point and you've already got so much out of it, that's fine. Let them take it over because you're already at the tail end of it, and it's not worth trying to treat it. So this is where you start thinking about timing other crops to support it, and timing your amendments and timing everything else. So that's why it gets, like I said, it gets complicated. but it's also fun and very, very creative, you know, to observe your ground, your land, and then figure out, what is it asking me to do? What's it asking me to do so that it can feed me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We had that one.
You make it up for you.
My wife and we have only one in the world when it comes down to planting. Growing up, I was taught that you leave space between the plants so that they have the opportunity to grow or pull nutrients from either side. Mm-hmm. And my wife comes to the other side, she'll take 3 feet, and she'll put 2 plants in between the 3 feet, which takes away from the proteins and other things that the plants might be able to grow. Is that true, folks?
I think it's crop specific. Depends on the crop.
Like corn, you need to plant them really close, but tomato plants need to space them out. Mm-hmm. Tomato plants need to space them out because a lot of times the diseases cross over by touch or by air. And so tomatoes are real susceptible to mold and mildew and other bugs like aphids and things like that. So you need to kind of space them out.
It's also true that you can do things differently in the high tunnel than you can in the field in terms of spacing. You know, you can have a higher concentration of plants within a high tunnel, generally because you are going to have somewhat less disease and somewhat less pests to pass from one to another. So you can actually plant closer together in a high tunnel than you can in the field.
The thing about the tomatoes, you're saying separate them out. But what if you put certain plants in between the tomatoes, like basil, marigolds? If you put them in between, they're supposed to help with the diseases.
Right.
So it's okay to put those in between lines.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it goes to the question, is what you put in between the tomato plants.
That's a great question.
Put several things in there. I mean, I'm just saying, you know, you don't want to let the air circulate and push it right on top of it.
Yeah.
You need to space that where you can work them too, and pick them.
We have we're not going to get to this, but we will eventually, and there's a huge diagram of 50 crops and then the same 50 crops here, and it shows each one, you know, how does it support or not the other crop, you know, that's next to it. You know, is it good or bad or indifferent? Yeah. You know, so it is a companion planting guide. So one of the things you really want to look at is like root depth.
Yeah.
You know, are they competing for the same nutrients? If they've got the same kind of root depth, they're going to go for the same thing. They're going to be competitors. Yeah. But if they're different, you know, then they can be more supportive of each other. And that's just one factor.
And remember, if you're doing companion planting, I mean, that increases your irrigation requirement.
Yep.
So how hard are you pushing your irrigation system past its limits? So.
And you know, we also said that, like I say, for high tunnels now, the true original intent was to extend the growing season. And we have tended to somewhat expand that idea. It can do a lot of other things too. Well, it maybe can, but the original intent was to be able to plant like 5 to 6 weeks on before the growing season starts in March, or extend the growing season in the fall. So, but if you hold it to that spirit, but then you can try other things. But then it was we can't defend the other things that probably are not successful in working as far as your planning routine or regimen. But the idea concept for high tunnel was extend growing season. Yeah.
It's like, I got a question for you. What kind of tomatoes do you put in the high tunnel? What variety?
Big boy.
You got to be determined.
The number one, based on the experience and trials, is Big Beef. Then it's stevia, then damsel, the BHN 589. Never heard of that one. There's one called Sun Peach. I've used Mountain Magic before. I've used Lemon Boy Plus, which is a yellow tomato. of these tomatoes, that's one another thing you have to, when you're doing high tunnels or any kind of cash crop, look at your seed varieties. Because a lot of times we get stuck on what daddy used to plant. And those things now are back. And it won't be as productive as some of these new type seed qualities.
And yes, you're probably going to want to do a one and done.
The determinant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, James was saying that they did these indeterminates last season and it just kept producing and it was so much work. So he said he very specifically at Piney Woods planted determinants this season for their tomatoes.
In the high tunnels.
But,
And the high tunnel gets hot in the summertime. Yeah, really hot.
but we should probably, since we're getting low on
One thing
time.
about it, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we're getting low on time. I think we need to.
I want
Think
to
about
ask
it.
more questions.
One thing
I wanna
about
get
it, you can't run a high tunnel operation, you wanna take a 5-week vacation and then it ain't gonna work. You gotta be there.
And then you build a sauna in the back of your high tunnel.
But I'm gonna try and go through this as quick as I can. I was just gonna introduce y'all to some variables. One is called it's distribution uniformity, and this is the information on it. It varies by the type of sprinkler system. The soil itself has distribution uniformities, and they're all calculated different. But they're measured from a scale of 0 to 1. 1 is perfect, 0 is horrible. You can't have 1. You can't. It's like you can't have anything that's 100% efficient. You can't have a perfect 1. You can have a 0.99, you can't have a 1. But what you want is the highest you can go. And with micro-irrigation systems, it is absolutely essential to have a high DU for it to be effective. And so this is an example of what good uniformity versus bad uniformity looks like. So this lower line here is how deep the water is reaching from their irrigation system. This is, you can see it's pretty uniform. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And the crop is more or less behaving, flourishing evenly. Here, for some reason, it's not. For some reason, this area is not getting the same amount of water. Maybe that area of soil is compacted. Maybe there's a lot of salt in it. Maybe there's an irrigation lateral there that's not working. For some reason, this area of the soil is not getting the same water as everything else, and the crop stand is suffering because of it. That is how distribution uniformity works. You really have to have a high distribution uniformity, especially with micro-irrigation systems if you want it to work well and produce for you well. And unfortunately, micro-irrigation systems are have the fastest degrade of a distribution uniformity. It will go down the quickest, and you have to stay on top of it the most. But again, a 40% bumper crop because you manage your micro-irrigation system is a very significant bonus. That's a lot of potential money in your pocket if you do it right. So yeah, these are just some of the factors that affect the DU. Slope, unequal drainage, edge effect, pest, animal damage, literally. And it's more than that. That's just some of them. How do you keep and raise a high DU? Well, regular maintenance and inspection when the system's running, when you're planting crops, you're going out, before you plant crops, you run the system. Am I seeing uniform wetted soil areas? Are there, why is that area of soil not getting wet? Why don't I see a dark patch over there? When the crop is growing, why is that section of the crop not doing as well? It's in the middle of everything else. Shouldn't it be doing as well? Controlling weeds that could potentially suck away nutrients and water. Compaction, getting the salt out of the soil, planting cover crops to increase the beneficial soil nutrients that allow your plants to flourish, filtering, flushing the irrigation system, preventing it from clogging and getting dirty, and then ensuring uniform opportunity time, that everyone has the same amount of time access to the water, and then controlling pests. Coyotes will sometimes attack drip hose. Crows will in some cases have learned that there's water in the pipes, and they'll go and peck through the plastic to get water because crows are really, really smart. Gophers, if you're using basin irrigation, which may have some big banks to allow you to flood the area, gopher may dig a hole through the bank, and when you try and flood it, ta-da, big leak, moles, etc. Look, 40% bumper crop for micro-irrigation if you keep your DU high, quickest to degrade, It's not something you can, it's not like a DU test as far as I'm aware. It's something you just have to notice that there's something unequal. There's some unequal behavior in the field, in your irrigation system. There's not really a one and done test you can get for it. Installing, calibrating, and maintaining. So this is the GK. We actually talked about a lot of this already. We kind of showed some of the basic stuff for it. It's pretty simple, and if you order, if you specifically get, I don't know all the different irrigation manufacturers because there's a lot. I know the GK1000 has very good instructions, literally a QR code with a YouTube video that it takes you to, and actual written out instructions as well, but the video is that you can use as well just to help you if the written instructions are not working for you.
And they also have real life instructions.
Yeah. I do not mind traveling. I have done it a lot the past few months. Installation and calibration of a custom system. They're custom systems. It's dependent on the irrigation specialist who's helped you, and dependent on the manufacturers that are providing the components that make up that system. So it's really, for that, it's following the specs for the manufacturer. That's really all it is, because no two are going to be exactly alike. Maintaining your system, as I just said, we're checking for uniform wet areas, uniform crop stands, gopher holes, crow damage, spiders and emitters. That's another bit of damage. Sometimes spiders will build nests in emitters because they're little deep, dark holes. And sometimes they'll do that with bubblers, which are a little bit bigger. But they'll go in there, and that web is dense enough to where that low flow rate can't push past it. And so it clogs it. Root intrusion, someone mentioned that earlier. Yeah, especially on subsurface drip irrigation, root intrusion, it'll find its way to the emitter and grow inside of it, which is like, yay, the plant is getting direct water. Yeah, that one root of that one plant is getting direct water, and none of its buddies can. So, but then replacing components when needed with approved parts, and then following the manufacturer's specs. So we already talked about charging. That's filling. That's when you turn your system on and you fill it. It's best to do that slowly. Flushing is draining it. It's also best to do that slowly.
Before chemicals and then after chemicals.
Yes. Back flushing is something that that you do with filtering systems. With that one we had over there, there's no such thing as back flushing. You just pull it out and clean it with a hose. But if you were to get a commercial one, or if you were to do one of those build it yourselves where you layered it up inside a tank, you'd still probably need to back flush that. And what back flushing is reversing the stream, because as the water filters, it filters out the contaminants, and so you need to back flush it to force those contaminants out, or else the media will actually get clogged. These are media tanks, they're filters. Literally, what is inside those tanks is most likely just a ton of sand. And that's all it is the water comes in from the top, flushes through the sand, goes out the bottom. That's filtered. And you can have these in arrangements of 1 tank, 2 tanks, 10 tanks in a row. I saw one on that blueberry farm that was kind of a tall cylinder, just one. But this is what you would want to back flush. You would want to force the water back up through it and let it drain out. There's going to be a drain valve somewhere on here where when you reverse the flow, it's going to come out. But that's very important. And I asked the guy who had that blueberry farm, he's like, have you ever back flushed this? He was like, no, what's that? I was like, well, that's probably one of the reasons the irrigation system's having trouble. It's 10 years old and it's never been back flushed. That's probably a factor. So salinity, we already talked about all that, so I think we can actually move on from that one. This is just a helpful diagram showing how soil salts work. The black areas represent the salt, the blue area is obviously the water, and then the crops show you where the crops are. Your plant is right there in the salt with its roots. So it's separated from the water and it's in the middle of the salt. That's very bad salt damage. Here, about half of the root zone actually has good access to the water, but the other half is getting burned by the salt. Bad. Moderately low, and then very low. And the reason that the salt keeps going to the highest points is because as water evaporates, the salt's getting lifted and lifted to the highest point until the water leaves it behind. So the salt is always at the top. So if you shape, these are furrows. These are literally a profile view of furrows. And if you shape your beds the right way, it's a way you can control for salt damage.
and let me inject something there. And the reason salts, they rise to the top precipitate in the elemental formula, the elemental weight, sodium and calcium and all those things are heavier, lighter than the water itself. So it has a lighter atomic weight. So therefore it's going to rise to the top and precipitate. And then it'll like I say, flood the area then and let it and flood it and wash it off and stuff. So that's the way it all goes back to your chemistry on how that happens and stuff. Like you say, even like rainwater precipitation, salt does not go up. You don't have it don't rain salt water because your salts are left behind.
Yep.
And what goes up into the atmosphere is your fresh water.
So if you flush out your hot tub and you straight that content of soil with the salt content in, what do you do with it?
Well, I mean, the salt just flushes down into the lower levels of the earth.
It's salt rises up too.
It'll eventually start coming back up, but over a
But
longer
if you
period.
straight it off,
Oh.
you do your hot tub.
If you were somehow able to lift enough of your salt off and then just clean the salt off the top, I don't know. I'm not sure that question's ever been posed to me.
Well, I don't think because it's been absorbed to the soil particles itself, so it would just have to flush off with the water molecules and out of the system. Now, like I say, you don't get 100% out, but you will get a high enough removal to have where it won't be harmful to your next crop. Yeah. So everything attaches itself to the soil material. Everything attaches itself.
Just a couple of quick things, real quick. I missed these earlier from some people in the audience. One is just talking about using cover crops, and say Brian talking about how he cuts his down to about 2 or 3 inches above the ground and then covers it with the tarp. And that's what James was talking about too at Piney Woods, about what they do. And they basically, smother it. Smother the cover is what they do with the tarp, and just using a basic silage tarp would be fine. And then Angela asked, how can you test for disease in the soil? I don't know if one of you soil scientists over here to my right.
Now, Delaney might know a better answer, but they're testing for like soil-borne diseases. Like, let's say they had some type of blight in the soil pop up. They're asking, how do you test for it? Now, do you know a test method? Because I always just treat it like we treat ourselves. We look for symptoms.
Yeah.
You'll look at your roots and see if they're dark and rotted. You'll look at your plants. You can see the leaves coming up if you're losing your leaves, defoliation, if you have yellowing of it, wilting. Because usually we're talking about a situation where you farm this area for an extended period of time. You know more or less how your crop is supposed to look.
Right.
And you haven't changed your practices, but now you're seeing yellowing, wilting, dead roots, and just other signs that let you know there's something going wrong here. Right. As far as a test, I know there is a field test you can get. I think it's called the ELISA test, but it is very specific and doesn't test for all pathogens, just some. So for a hobby farmer, general, you're just growing for your family, it may not be worth the investment. I think they're kind of expensive, but Delaney, do you know of any other tests?
No, that's it. You said it.
You could also look at a crop tissue sample.
Yep, that's another one.
So a crop tissue sample would show you the impact of the disease, and that's a way that they can infer what it is.
Yeah.
It's all you just have to look at, know your land, your plants, and how they come up, and just play an active role in the growth process, so you notice these things as they're occurring.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of it will be along the veins, or some of it will be along the leaves, the foliage of discoloration. Some will be spots, and then that diagnosis is synonymous with a particular type of pathogen or disease, just by observation and diagnosis.
Well, if we are, I think we're getting close actually. I'm gonna try and get all us out of here before I overload your brains, and so that we can actually have questions and do more of that organically. But the next thing that I was going to talk about was chemical injection, which we already talked about, really. So all I wanted to touch on was that to clean it, typically you use bleach. It doesn't mean just pour a freaking jug of bleach into the thing, read the instructions, and figure out exactly how much to put in there, because too much bleach is very, very bad for you. And you would typically do that either before, probably after a planting season, actually, after you've harvested, because you don't want the bleach to go get in your crop. So
when
time that.
One thing that was really important that we wanted to mention too is that so when you're doing chemigation, fertigation, kind of synonymous, but it means injecting chemicals into the irrigation system, right? Into your irrigation water. So when you're doing that, as Doug said, you have to charge the system, and then you have to flush the system. So you charge it to get it going. That initial charge is when you're using irrigation water only.
Yep.
And then you turn it on, and then you start bringing the fertilizer into it. All right, so you get the irrigation good and flowing first, then you bring the fertilizer into it, and then you stop the fertilizer part. You cut that injection off, and then you continue to let the water run, and that's flushing it out. So one important thing to keep in mind is that that's all, that water that happens at the beginning and the end, that's irrigation water, right? So the whole thing is irrigation, and only part of it is fertigation. But when you're looking at how much food your plant needs and how much water your plant needs, both of those things are calculated.
Yep.
Okay, just making sure everybody understands that.
Yep. In the next section, I know I skipped 2 slides. We'll go back to those if we have time, because I worked really hard on them. But I'd rather get to the end because there's something I really want to give you. The next stuff, and we're getting close. We're very close. Managing drainage water on the farm. So here's a map of the drainage basins of Mississippi. So I'm sure a lot of y'all who know our geography really well can recognize we've got the Pearl in this kind of yellowy green here. So anything that's in that area with that yellow is the Pearl. It all drains into the Pearl, goes into the Gulf. The green, obviously, it all drains into the Mississippi. I believe the big black is in there as well. That's the Pascagoula River. Yep, everything in that kind of whitish yellow cream color is Pascagoula. Again, Gulf. And I believe this is the Tombigbee that goes into Alabama. And again, the Gulf. So all the water in Mississippi ends up in the Gulf. So why do we need to manage drainage runoff? One, irrigation water can be expensive. As we were saying, 27,000 gallons. You may want to recycle that. That's a hefty bill. That's a lot of water. So runoff also erodes the soil, which we've talked about. It can cause major issues. Obviously, losing the topsoil is the most beneficial nutrients. So we really want to keep that if we can. Improper drainage causes ponding, damages crops, high tunnel specifics. Some local ordinances require it with that surface irrigation. Sometimes you are forced to have a settling basin where you're collecting your runoff. And agricultural runoff is a significant contributor to the dead zone. So the dead zone is, well, so first to say this is the drainage basin for the Mississippi River overall, which drains 41% of the entire country. A massive amount of water. Literally 41% of the water in America comes through the Mississippi and ends up in the Gulf. So it's a lot. All ends up in there, and the Great Dead Zone is this area that is, what is it? In 2018, it was about 2,000 square miles. For a frame of reference, Hinds, Madison, and Rankin counties together about 2,400 square miles. So it's an area about the size of 3 counties that has so much agricultural chemical runoff in it that it has essentially killed everything in the water. It has produced an algae bloom, which means there's no more oxygen in the water for anything else to live, because fish will breathe oxygen. So all the fish are driven out of it. No wildlife lives in there. Fishermen can't fish in there. They have to go further out to find fish. So it's a significant source of pollution, that all this agricultural runoff going down the Mississippi River. So that's one of the big reasons.
One comment.
Oh, go for it.
There are more chemicals and fertilizers sold at Walmart and Brandon than the Rankin County Co-op. So it's not only agriculture, it's residential.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
From cities, from the, it's, but if we can limit the chemicals we're using, cover cropping, things like that. You know, I like seafood. I don't know about y'all. I enjoy seafood.
Isn't a lot of that coming from all the freight being moved through the Mississippi as well, though?
Well, it's the algae bloom is
It's everything.
it's but the algae bloom specifically is from the nitrogen and the phosphorus, which are principally agricultural.
Okay.
Eutrophication.
Yep.
You know where your wastewater goes to? When you flush the commode right here, where does it go? In the Pearl River.
We're only about 100 yards away.
Yeah.
So what can we do? Stop over irrigating. Collecting, filtering runoff. Yeah, we've already talked about apply fertilizer, the recommended rates, install filter strips, and these are getting back into the NRCS practices, the various practices they have for trying to manage this, using cover cropping, recycling and reusing irrigation water. This is an example of a settling basin. Settling basins are typically they are used to collect surface irrigation water. Typically, they're rectangular in size or in shape, and so they're long and narrow. And the general rules for them are the water inlet is as far away from the water outlet as possible. And the whole idea is the water enters, and then in the process of making its journey through the other side, the solid particulates and things that are in the water slowly settle to the bottom, to where on the other side, all that's running out is clean water. And then you can pump that water back up, maybe do a little more filtering, but it's largely ready to use. So that's an example of managing drainage water, but that's for surface irrigation. For micro-irrigation, you really don't, if you're doing it right, you really shouldn't have drainage water. Like, you really shouldn't have runoff and drainage water with micro-irrigation if you're doing it the way you should. Now remember, if it's gonna rain, you don't need to irrigate. So pay attention to the weather cycles, because you don't need to turn on the micro-irrigation system if it's just rain. You're fine.
Unless you're in a high tone.
Yeah, unless you're in high tone.
Yep. He's right. So, do we have time for this? Do you? Okay.
No.
So that was a video explaining the tile system. The tile system is essentially, I can explain it in a quicker version. Tile system is basically, it's a little more in depth, a little more aggressive way of building water management on the farm and irrigation. But basically what you do is you install a system beneath the soil that traps water, and then you have these pipes that are gated. You control the gates of these pipes, and during certain parts of the year you basically dam up these gates, and it holds the water level very, very high in the field to help produce your crop. And then at the right time of the year you open that drain up and let the water out. Now it's a bit of an involved process, you know, to get it set up, but it allows for direct manipulation and control of the water table, and it's very helpful potentially if you have, you know, seasonal water issues with how much water you're getting.
This is one of the systems that really is only been engineered for larger farms, that we would like to try to figure out how we can create something, a smaller version of this that can be adapted to small farms at an affordable price point, and pitch to NRCS ultimately to try to get behind that.
Yep. Well, and now we've come to the end. This is what I want you guys to have. So I'll explain what it is, and then you guys should all take it as much as you can and save it on your phones. The Irrigation Consumer Bill of Rights. What, you know, some years ago the government said, hey, wait a minute, farmers and irrigation people don't know how to talk to each other to prevent themselves from making costly mistakes in what they're selling and what they're buying. So the government said, hey, we'll make a free document that's a questionnaire for the farmers. It just basically tells the farmers what to ask when they're talking to irrigation people. Hey, are you certified to do this? Hey, have we planned for this part of the, you know, salinity flushing issue? Have we planned for this? It's a free document. Those QR codes will take you right to it. No sign up, no account creation, anything like that. It's just publicly provided, and it's 2 questionnaires, and all it is you take them, and when you're talking with irrigation people, you ask them, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? It means you don't have to actually know all the super specific details. You're just prompting them to make sure you're not wasting money. It's like, oh, I got an irrigation system, but it wasn't the right one. Now I'm out $40K and I got to get a new one. So scan those QR codes, take those. That's the link for it right there. You can just search that online as well. Irrigation Consumer Bill of Rights. It comes up nice and easy. But please, if you walk away with nothing else from my presentation, if you at least have that, I will be very happy, because at least I know you can go and have the conversation, and you should be able to get what you need.
All right. Thank you, Dex. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation.
Back if we wanted to go back.
I don't know. We don't have time for that right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming upon the end here of. I know. We just got started, right?
It's just fine.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to give you guys a big hand for your participation today. This is a long day, and we did turn the hydrant on and give you a lot of information. But I think everybody up here really appreciates your attentiveness and the questions you ask, and just your engagement. And we are very happy that y'all are here and that you exist and you're doing the things that you're doing. I also very much like to thank our panel today, our presenters and our panel. Thank y'all so much for coming in here on a Saturday to do this. It really means a lot. One of the last things I wanted to say here is that part of this is a prelude to a new project that we are doing on Climate Smart. And some of you may have heard of this and the general concept of it, the idea. But we have been awarded a grant through USDA over the next 5 years to work on a Climate Smart project with small producers. That small, historically underserved producers, that's our target. And what does that mean? And some of you are like, well, I'm not even really farming yet. I'm not even doing that. It's okay. This is a 5-year program, and we are only starting with about 5 farms this year. But by year 5, we're going to work with 30 farms. All right. And so it gives people time to grow. The very things we're talking about today are the foundations for climate smart growing, where we're really looking at sequestering carbon and preventing greenhouse gas emissions from seeping into the atmosphere, trying to prevent that dead zone from happening. But at the same time, trying to help you become better, more productive farmers. And kind of like with what happened with organic, where there's a 30% average markup on the retail value because it's organic, we think that we can do something similar here with this type of growing, something that we can help promote and market, and we want people to be a part of and say, I meet these standards, this is the way I'm growing this, I can quantify that, I can actually show you the impact that I'm having from my soil tests, from the measurements we're doing, and from the records we're keeping. So you should pay me more. You should pay me more for being a local farmer. And that's what we think, we hope can help make up some of that cost differential to make it more affordable, give you guys more profit in the process of making food that we all need. So this is, again, the beginning of that process. We will have lots and lots of trainings like this. You don't have to participate in the program itself to come to the trainings and participate in the trainings and grow along that side. The participation in the program it's a contract-driven opportunity. So where we actually provide incentives to people per acre to grow. So it's about $1,500 per acre, and then matching additional funds spent, reimbursement for production expenses, and then further reimbursement for marketing expenses if people go that far. So that is what we're working toward. So we'll have a lot more information about that coming out, and we'll make sure that we have a good segment on that at the next workshop that we have. And we look forward to a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road as you guys are actually, getting your hands a little dirtier, getting your minds a little cleaner, that we'll be out here working together on that. Okay? All right. So we don't have another workshop posted yet. We are doing another one at Piney Woods on the 15th of May on a Wednesday, and we are going to look at crop rotations there. But we'll do another version of that here too, where it's specifically crop rotations and cover cropping. Okay. And we'll save everything for questions now. Yes, please.
Do you guys do like farm field trips?
Yeah, only if there's a hayride involved. And like a corn maze. Do you have? No. Yeah, we do field trips. Yeah, we do. We call them farm visits. But yeah, we do farm visits. Yes.
Like that, like we could attend.
What's that?
Like the public, or like
Oh,
us.
she's talking
Other way,
about.
reverse, the reverse. They
Like
can
showing
they come
off
to
the
us.
farm that they can come look at
Like
with us.
they could come to Piney Woods.
Come to Piney Woods.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are typically on Wednesdays because they like their students to attend the workshops as well. So we typically do those on Wednesdays. Right now we're going to have two more. We're going to do one on cover crops and then one on, we're coming back and doing another one on high tunnels. I think that one's going to be in June. That hasn't been scheduled yet. But they are trying to do a little bit of reorganizing because I think the workshops there have been a big success and they want to continue those. So, and then they're applying for more grants. So they hope that will go on indefinitely over there.
What's the time frame on those Wednesday visits? I know it's morning time, but.
Yeah, typically we go from about 9 a.m. till 2 p.m., which includes an hour break for lunch in the courtesy of the cafeteria there at Piney Woods.
That's good.
Yeah. So people sometimes they have to leave at lunch, and
That's what we were just talking about. We'll definitely have to leave early on Wednesday.
yeah. But we plan to have this is our facility, and like we said, this is only our second workshop that we've hosted here. But we're going to host these much more frequently now that we've kind of settled into our space. And also, all of these things that we do, we are creating videos for, and posting them online. It does take a minute to get everything edited because we're shooting with 3 cameras, and these are long, so you can imagine you're going to have like over 24 hours of footage to sort through and connect, and so it takes a minute to get some of these things out, but eventually everything will be out. And we are here for follow-up. Specifically NRCS, you can always contact them. Does everybody get contact information from the beginning? All right, let me pull that back up, and then you also can coordinate with Delaney and Dex, and for a farm visit to come out. Let's see. Let me open that one back up. Let's see. There, nope. There you go. Okay, there you go. Oh, Jeff, I don't have your email on there. Somebody wants to contact you.
Galilee Consulting.
What is it?
Galilee Consulting.
Galilee? Galilee Consulting.
At yahoo.com.
At yahoo.com. Okay. Do we have any more questions? Yeah, someone got. Yeah, we did a workshop at Piney Woods last week, and it was amazing. The kids were having so much fun. The admin just had to come in and say, you have to leave. You have to leave. So that was good. And with that, we are done, but feel free to...
Please go sign in on the sign-in sheet, which is right there by the high tunnel on the table over there.
Thank you. And
Thank you so much.
check out the high tunnel model.
We did the convertible one.
Yeah.